Hey there, tonight we're uncovering how World War II changed Christmas forever. What you're about to discover is how wartime rationing gave birth to some of our most cherished holiday traditions. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now settle in, maybe turn on some white noise or grab your favorite blanket, and let's drift into tonight's story together. The Christmas of 1940 was a far cry from the typical Dickensian vision of roasted chestnuts and opulent feasts. Picture this. Instead of bustling through the aisles for the perfect gift, families in wartime Britain were more likely to find themselves standing in line for rationed sugar and butter. It's hard to deck the halls with boughs of holly when you're worried whether your next meal will include anything more festive than Spam. The economic landscape of World War II was like an uninvited guest who not only crashed the party, but also ate all the Christmas pudding. In a world where resources were stretched thinner than a supermodel on a juice cleanse, Christmas, as people knew, it had to be reimagined. The wartime economy didn't just affect the average Joe's stocking stuffers. It reshaped the entire holiday. The war effort required materials like rubber, metal, and textiles, not for sprucing up the tree, but for building tanks and airplanes. While Santa's sleigh was traditionally piled high with toys, during the war, it might have looked more like a recycling bin. The British government wasn't interested in making Christmas merry and bright. They were busy making sure the country didn't run out of essential supplies. Rationing became the new normal, and it wasn't just food. Everything from petrol to paper was controlled. The Ministry of Food issued ration books like they were the hardest accessory of the season, and people had to get creative. Imagine trying to whip up a festive feast with powdered eggs and margarine. It's no wonder wartime recipes often read like a chemistry experiment gone awry. But necessity is the mother of invention, or so they say. People began to embrace an era of make, do, and mend. Instead of buying new clothes, they were encouraged to make do with what they had, or to mend worn items. Christmas gifts became exercises in ingenuity. Homemade presents were not just a quaint idea, but a necessity. Instead of the shiny toys and trinkets of yesteryear, children might find a hand-knitted scarf or a toy carved from scrap wood in their stockings. Creative gift-giving wasn't just a heartwarming tale for the ages, it was a survival tactic. The holiday table, too, underwent a transformation. Without the luxury of imported goods, traditional dishes were reinvented. Turkey was a rarity, often replaced by rabbit or chicken, whatever could be raised at home. Christmas pudding, a staple of the festive spread, was made with more breadcrumbs than fruit. Yet despite these lean times, the spirit of Christmas persevered. Families rallied together, finding joy in simplicity and community rather than consumption. As if the war and its economic constraints weren't enough to shake up the season, there was also a concerted effort to rebrand Christmas as a beacon of patriotism. Enter Santa Claus, with a makeover more dramatic than a Hollywood starlet. The jolly old man in red wasn't just delivering toys, he was delivering messages of national solidarity. Advertisers and propaganda machines went into overdrive, turning Santa into a cheerleader for the war effort. Forget the North Pole. Santa was now a frequent visitor to munitions factories and military hospitals, sporting a uniform that would make Uncle Sam proud. Advertising during this period took a sharp turn. Companies, aware of the public's limited disposable income and the need to support the war, crafted campaigns that were less about selling and more about boosting morale. Coca-Cola, for instance, famously depicted Santa as a symbol of American might, highlighting the importance of keeping spirits up. The message was clear. Enjoying a Coke was practically a patriotic duty, a small luxury in the face of adversity. This era marked a significant shift in how Christmas was perceived not only in the UK, but across the world. It was no longer simply about individual family gatherings or religious reflection. It had become a collective effort to maintain national morale. In many ways, Christmas during World War II was less about presents under the tree and more about presence of loved ones, of community, of shared sacrifice. Beneath the tinsel and baubles of pre-war Christmas, There had always been a complex web of commercial interests and social expectations. World War II stripped that back to the basics, revealing the heart of the holiday: resilience, creativity, and an unwavering sense of togetherness against the odds. As families gathered around their modestly adorned trees, they weren't just celebrating a holiday. They were participating in a global testament to the enduring human spirit. So, as we think about how war transformed Christmas, it's clear that it wasn't just an exercise in frugality or a shift in how we view Santa. It was a profound reimagining of what it means to celebrate, a lesson in finding light in the darkest of times. And while the specifics have changed over the decades, that core lesson remains as relevant today as it was back then. As the dust settled over war-torn lands, the human spirit did what it does best: adapt and endure. But let's not sugarcoat it. Christmas during World War II was a mixed bag, like getting socks and a puppy on the same morning. Sure, families were rallying around each other, but the absence of loved ones cast a long shadow over the festivities. Imagine trying to muster holiday cheer when your dinner table had more empty chairs than a Monday morning meeting. With millions of soldiers stationed abroad, families had to find creative ways to bridge the gap between home and the front lines. Enter the Christmas care package, an unassuming hero of the holiday season. These packages weren't just about sending a slice of home to the battlefront. They were meticulously engineered acts of love. Imagine a box stuffed with homemade fudge, knitted socks, and letters drenched in perfume, each item a tactile reminder that someone cared. While the contents varied, the sentiment was universal. We miss you. Please come home safe. According to the United States Postal Service, over 75 million pounds of mail were sent to service members overseas in December 1944 alone. That's about the weight of 500 elephants, all carrying messages of hope and longing. These packages were lifelines, little parcels of morale that reminded soldiers why they were fighting. But let's not fool ourselves into thinking these care packages were all sunshine and rainbows. The logistics were a nightmare. Parcels took weeks, sometimes months, to reach their destination, and there was no tracking number to obsessively check every day. Radio broadcasts also played a crucial role in keeping spirits high and connections strong. Imagine a time before FaceTime, where the sound of your loved one's voice was as rare as a double rainbow. From the BBC's Forces Christmas Show to stateside broadcasts like Mail Call, radio became a sonic bridge between continents. These programs weren't just about entertainment. They were morale boosters, delivering messages and music straight into the trenches. In December 1943, listeners tuned in to hear Bing Crosby croon "I'll Be Home for Christmas," a song that became an anthem of longing. But let's get real. No amount of crooning could replace the warmth of a hug from a loved one. That song, while heartwarming, was more of a bittersweet reminder of what was missing. Letters were another vital lifeline, albeit a slower one. Imagine the anticipation of waiting for news, a process slower than molasses in January. Yet these letters were the heartbeat of the home front. They were filled with tales of everyday life, updates on children growing up too fast, and assurances that everything would be okay. Soldiers, in turn, wrote back with stories of camaraderie and the occasional sanitized account of life at the front. Censorship loomed large, with letters often arriving with more blacked-out lines than a redacted government document. It was a game of patience and resilience, one that tested the emotional fortitude of senders and recipients alike. And then there's the myth of holiday morale, a romantic notion that soldiers spent Christmas gathered round a roaring fire, singing carols with comrades. While there were moments of genuine camaraderie, they were often overshadowed by the harsh realities of war. Trench foot and freezing temperatures were hardly conducive to holiday cheer. In December 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, soldiers faced not only the enemy, but also some of the coldest winter conditions in European history. If a soldier managed to snag a hot meal or a dry pair of socks, it was as good as gold. Forget chestnuts roasting on an open fire. Staying warm was often the best gift of all. Despite the challenges, these efforts to maintain holiday connections and spirits were not in vain. They were a testament to the enduring human need for connection and hope. Christmas during World War II wasn't just a date on the calendar. It was a collective act of defiance against despair. The holiday became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there was still light to be found. But let's not romanticize it too much. The reality was that many families faced the holiday season with a mix of dread and determination. Christmas wasn't just about peace and goodwill. It was about survival and the longing for a return to normalcy. Families clung to traditions, however altered, as a way to assert control over a world that had spun wildly out of balance. As the war dragged on, the holiday season became a microcosm of the larger struggle. It was a time when people had to reconcile the joy of the season with the harshness of reality, a balancing act as precarious as a tightrope walk over a chasm of uncertainty. Yet, in the midst of it all, there was an undeniable sense of community and shared purpose. People came together, not just in their homes, but in their hearts, reaffirming what truly mattered. So, as we continue our journey through the wartime Christmases, remember that beneath the tinsel and twinkling lights, there was a profound story of human endurance and adaptability. It wasn't just about the presents or the feast. It was about the presence of hope and the promise of brighter days ahead. And that, dear friends, is a legacy worth remembering. And so, as the war-weary world exhaled a collective sigh of relief, it ushered in a new era where Christmas was redefined yet again. With the ink barely dry on the peace treaties, a whirlwind of political and cultural shifts began to take shape, leaving their mark on the holiday season. In the immediate aftermath of World War II, the promise of economic recovery hung in the air like the scent of gingerbread. The war had left economies battered, but the post-war boom was like hitting the jackpot with a handful of loose change. You didn't quite believe your luck, but you were going to enjoy every penny. The introduction of new traditions and the commercialization of Christmas were driven by this economic recovery. The 1950s and 60s were a time when consumerism donned its holiday best and strutted down Main Street like it owned the place. With GDPs soaring faster than Santa's sleigh on Christmas Eve, Christmas became less about making do and more about making it big. The United States, in particular, emerged as an economic powerhouse, and its influence spread faster than rumors in a small town. Christmas became a showcase for this newfound prosperity. Retail sales in December became a vital economic indicator, with Americans spending billions, yes, billions with a B, on gifts and decorations. The holiday season was an all-you-can-eat buffet of consumerism, and retailers were more than happy to serve up heaping portions. Advertisements promised a picture-perfect Christmas filled with shiny new gadgets and toys that seemed to scream, "Buy me, I'm part of your dream." It was as if the ghost of Charles Dickens had been replaced by the ghost of Madison Avenue, and everyone was invited to the party. The post-war period saw the birth of iconic holiday staples like the aluminum Christmas tree, which was about as natural as a Hollywood starlet's hair color, but embraced for its futuristic flair. In this era of economic exuberance, Christmas also became a battleground for Cold War politics. The holiday spirit was conscripted into the ideological struggle between capitalism and communism. The Soviets, suspicious of Western decadence, viewed Christmas as a bourgeois distraction from the proletariat's mission. Meanwhile, the United States was busy wrapping its version of Christmas in stars and stripes, marketing it as a celebration of freedom and prosperity. Talk about a holiday makeover. Santa Claus traded in his red suit for a role as an unofficial ambassador of American values. What's fascinating is how American holiday customs soon started making global rounds, spreading faster than a viral meme. Coca-Cola's Jolly Santa, with his twinkling eyes and rosy cheeks, became an international icon. The company's marketing genius turned this version of Santa into the de facto image of Christmas worldwide, a testament to the power of American pop culture. This was globalization before the term was even a twinkle in an economist's eye. But let's not get too carried away with the hallmark version of events. The reality was that the commercialization of Christmas wasn't universally embraced. Critics argued that the holiday had lost its soul, morphing into a spectacle of excess. It was the age-old debate. Was Christmas about the presents under the tree, or was it about the presence of loved ones around it? As consumer culture gained momentum, this question became more relevant than ever. The commercialization boom brought back some of the pre-war excess, but with a distinctly modern twist. It was as if the ghost of Christmas past had been given a Rolex and a credit card with no limit. While some were busy decking their halls with boughs of Harley and brand new appliances, others were left longing for the simpler Christmases of yesteryear. This nostalgia for simpler times added yet another layer to the holiday season, leading to a curious blend of old and new traditions. In a sense, Christmas became a microcosm of the broader societal changes sweeping the globe. It was a time of contrasts and contradictions, where the warmth of family gatherings coexisted with the cold reality of geopolitical tensions. As the Cold War heated up, so too did the cultural war over Christmas. The holiday became a tool of soft power, a way to showcase the supposed superiority of the capitalist way of life. Western nations flaunted their festive excess like a badge of honor, while the Eastern Bloc maintained a more subdued approach, emphasizing community and equality. Yet behind these political theatrics lay a universal truth. No matter the economic system, people yearned for hope and joy during the darkest time of the year. But let's not overlook the economic undercurrents that continue to shape the holiday. The post-war boom wasn't just about buying more, it was also about redefining value. As disposable incomes rose, so did the expectations of what constituted a merry Christmas. It wasn't enough to have a turkey on the table, you needed the best turkey, perfectly cooked with all the trimmings. The pressure to perform, to create the ideal holiday experience, was almost as palpable as the aroma of roasting chestnuts. And yet, amid the glitz and glamour, the true spirit of Christmas managed to endure. Families found ways to balance the pressures of modern life with the timeless traditions that made the holiday special. There was room for both the old and the new, for both the commercial and the heartfelt. Even as the political and cultural landscape shifted, the core of Christmas remained the same. A celebration of human connection, resilience, and the hope for a brighter tomorrow. So, as we look back at the post-war evolution of Christmas, we see a holiday that was both a reflection of its time and a timeless reminder of what truly matters. Whether through the lens of consumerism or Cold War politics, Christmas remained a beacon of light in a world that was constantly changing. And that, my friends, is a story worth telling. As the narrative of Christmas continues to unfold, we'll explore how these post-war changes set the stage for the holiday we know today. There's much more to uncover, so stay tuned as we delve deeper into the fascinating evolution of this beloved celebration. So as we crack open this next chapter of wartime Christmases, let's unwrap some of the myths draped in tinsel and nostalgia. Hollywood might have you believe that soldiers spent their wartime holidays exchanging gifts and heartfelt camaraderie across no man's land. But let me toss a snowball of reality your way. Those so-called Christmas truces were as rare as a white Christmas in Miami. Sure, there's the famous 1914 Christmas truce of World War I, where German and British troops supposedly played a friendly game of soccer. It's a heartwarming image, one that's been passed down through pop culture like a regifted fruitcake. But during World War II, the war machine was far less forgiving. The idea of widespread ceasefires and merriment was mostly a Yuletide fantasy. In reality, most soldiers were more likely to be dodging enemy fire than swapping stories over a campfire. Take, for instance, the famous ceasefire myth during the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944. This was no snowy wonderland of peace. Instead, it was a brutal, freezing slugfest in the Ardennes where temperatures dropped to bone-chilling -20 degrees C, -4 degrees F. Soldiers battled not only the enemy, but also frostbite and hunger. The idea of stopping to roast chestnuts or sing carols was about as realistic as Santa's reindeer showing up to help. In fact, the closest most soldiers got to a truce was a temporary lull in the gunfire due to sheer exhaustion or logistical hiccups. The truth was, both sides were too entrenched in survival mode to entertain the notion of a festive pause. So while the legend of holiday ceasefires paints a picture of universal brotherhood, the reality was grittier, harsher, and far less cinematic. But why do these myths endure? Partly because they offer a glimmer of hope in a landscape dominated by despair. They're the equivalent of finding a sparkling ornament in a box of tangled lights, a reminder of humanity in the darkest of times. We cling to these stories because they suggest that even amidst chaos, peace is possible. Yet the war didn't just dictate what happened on the battlefield. It reshaped the home front too. With men off fighting, Women took on roles that were previously out of reach, from factory work to farming. Rosie the Riveter didn't take a holiday, and neither did the sense of community that sprang up among those left behind. Christmas gatherings might have been smaller, but they were steeped in a shared resolve to keep life as normal as possible. Meanwhile, the economic realities of the time turned holiday traditions on their head. With rationing still in full swing, sugar and butter were more valuable than a new pair of nylons. Instead of lavish feasts, families got creative with what was available. Think more war cake, made with molasses, and less of the traditional fruit cake. Even Christmas trees were a luxury, often replaced by makeshift alternatives like decorated potted plants. It was a time when improvisation wasn't just a survival skill, it was an art form. The government, not missing a beat, played its part in reshaping Christmas, too. Propaganda posters encouraged people to buy war bonds as gifts, positioning financial support for the war effort as the ultimate act of holiday generosity. The message was clear. Forget the new bicycle. Invest in victory. It was a far cry from today's consumer-driven frenzy, where the latest gadget is king. Yet amid these practical concerns, the myth of the perfect Christmas persisted. It's the same myth that keeps us coming back to those old black and white movies where snow falls gently and all problems are solved by the final act. Wartime Christmases, however, were often anything but perfect. They were filled with longing and uncertainty, a stark contrast to the glossy images we conjure up today. As we peel back these layers, it's important to remember that the myths aren't entirely without merit. They reflect a deep-seated desire for connection and peace, ideals that are timeless, even if the circumstances are not. They remind us that in the face of adversity, the human spirit can still find ways to celebrate and hope. So the next time you hang a bauble on your tree, consider the stories behind the sparkle. The wartime Christmases of the past were a testament to resilience and reinvention, where the true gift was often the simple act of being present. And while the myths might add a touch of magic to the narrative, the reality is no less inspiring. It's a reminder that even in the bleakest of winters, the warmth of human kindness can light the way. In closing this chapter, we leave the door ajar for more tales from the past. There's still much to explore about how these war-torn holidays laid the foundation for the modern Christmas we know today. So hold onto your stockings, because the journey isn't over yet. And just like that, we find ourselves at the final act of this wartime Christmas saga, where the ghosts of holidays past shake hands with the realities of the present. So, what exactly did World War II leave under the global Christmas tree, besides a heap of ration books and a penchant for makeshift decorations? Well, buckle up, because we've got some intriguing gifts to unwrap. First up, let's talk consumer behavior. The war years had folks pinching pennies tighter than a miser's handshake, but the post-war boom flipped the script like a holiday miracle. Suddenly, it was raining money, and people were eager to spend it faster than Santa on a caffeine rush. By the 1950s, American consumers were dropping cash like confetti. Between 1945 and 1950, retail sales jumped by a staggering 150%. Christmas became the Super Bowl of shopping, and department stores were the stadiums where this consumerist game was played. But it wasn't just about buying more, although, let's be honest, there was a lot of that. It was about buying smart. The war had taught people the fine art of stretching a dollar, and they didn't forget it overnight. Even as prosperity blossomed, the ethos of make, do, and mend lingered like the ghost of Christmas thrift. Practical gifts, home-crafted decorations, and a focus on meaningful experiences became the ornaments on the tree of post-war Christmas celebrations. Now, you can't talk about the evolution of Christmas without tipping your hat to the economic context. The United States emerged from the war flexing its economic muscles, and Christmas was the perfect stage for this display of newfound affluence. By 1958, holiday spending was a whopping $8 billion, roughly $75 billion in today's money. Not only did this shape American Christmas traditions, but it also sent shockwaves across the globe. The Great American Christmas became a cultural export, a shiny package of Western optimism delivered to the doorsteps of nations trying to rebuild. Speaking of global practices, let's take a sleigh ride across the Atlantic to see how the British and their Commonwealth cousins were faring. The war had left the UK with a hangover of austerity, and rationing lingered longer than an unwelcome party guest, well into the early 50s, in fact. But this didn't dampen the festive spirit, it merely redirected it. The Brits, ever the masters of stiff upper lip, turned Christmas into a celebration of community resilience. Street parties, communal meals, and collective carol singing became the hallmarks of a uniquely British Yuletide. Australia and Canada, meanwhile, took a page from the American playbook, embracing the commercialization of Christmas with gusto. By 1950, Australians were reveling in a blend of traditional British customs and newfangled American influences, all wrapped up in a sun-drenched, barbecue-fueled package. And let's not forget Canada, where the post-war prosperity boom saw the rise of massive Christmas parades, including the iconic Toronto Santa Claus Parade, which by 1956 was being broadcast nationwide, reaching millions of viewers. But let's not pretend this was all just a jolly holiday romp. The impact of the war on Christmas was as complex as a tangled string of lights. It reshaped the holiday into a reflection of broader social and economic changes. The wartime experience had taught people to find joy in simplicity and to value resilience over material excess. The holidays became less about what you had and more about who you were with, a lesson that remains as relevant as ever in today's fast-paced, consumer-driven world. However, let's not sugarcoat it. The commercialization of Christmas wasn't without its critics. Even as families embraced the newfound abundance, some voices lamented the loss of the holiday's simpler, more authentic roots. The debate over the true meaning of Christmas became a perennial fixture, as evergreen as the trees themselves. Was Christmas about the glitzy presents and elaborate feasts, or was it about the quieter moments of reflection and connection? It's here that the wartime legacy of adaptability and resilience truly shines. Christmas, once a static holiday, became a dynamic celebration capable of evolving with the times. From its wartime roots of make do and mend to the post-war consumer boom, Christmas proved itself to be as flexible as a reindeer in yoga class. It was a holiday that could bend without breaking, adapting to the changing needs and values of society. And so, as we bring this historical journey to a close, let's take a moment to appreciate the enduring legacy of these wartime Christmases. They taught us that even in the darkest times, there is light to be found. They showed us that resilience and adaptability are gifts that never lose their value, no matter how much the world changes. And they reminded us that the true spirit of Christmas isn't found in the gifts under the tree, but in the presence of hope and community. So next time you find yourself tangled in a string of holiday lights or knee-deep in wrapping paper, remember the wartime Christmases that laid the foundation for the celebrations we know today. They are a testament to the strength of the human spirit and a reminder that, even in the face of adversity, we can find ways to celebrate, to connect, and to hope for a brighter tomorrow. And that, my friends, is a legacy worth cherishing. The salty spray of the North Atlantic slaps your face as you stand on the deck of a longship, the quintessential symbol of Viking exploration. It's the 9th century, and you're not just here for the bracing ocean breeze. You're part of an era filled with restless energy, where the horizon isn't a boundary but an invitation. But why exactly are you and your fellow Norsemen venturing into these wild, unpredictable waters? Let's unpack that. First off, let's address the elephant in the room, or rather, the horned helmets. Spoiler alert, they didn't have those. Vikings weren't just marauding pillagers in fancy headgear. In fact, the Viking Age, spanning from the late 8th to early 11th century, was more of a Scandinavian wide-scale exploration period than a 3-century-long crime spree. Sure, they raided, but they were also traders, settlers, and explorers. So, why did they set sail into the terrifying unknown of the North Atlantic? Economic necessity, a bit of wanderlust, and the sheer thrill of adventure. Back home, the Scandinavian lands were a tad crowded, to say the least. Norway's rugged terrain and limited arable land made farming challenging. With a growing population, the land couldn't sustain everyone. It was like musical chairs with fewer and fewer seats. So, the solution: find new lands. Settling in foreign territories wasn't just a good idea. It was often a matter of survival. And let's be real, the allure of returning home with tales of distant shores and bags of silver was pretty compelling, too. Now, you might wonder how these seafaring adventurers managed to cross vast, treacherous waters with nothing more than the stars and their wits. Enter the longship. Crafted with precision and a touch of Viking genius, these sleek vessels were the supercars of their time, only, made of wood and powered by oars. They averaged about 75 feet in length, with the larger ones carrying up to 60 warriors. Their shallow draft allowed them to sail in just 3 feet of water, making them perfect for both open sea voyages and sneaky river raids. It's like having a yacht that can double as a speedboat. Longships were not just functional, they were revolutionary. The clinker-built hulls, with overlapping planks, provided a sturdy yet flexible structure ideal for the North Atlantic's roiling waves. And lest we forget the infamous dragon heads carved at the prow, not just for intimidation, but possibly to ward off evil spirits. Superstitious or not, it's always good to have a little nautical talisman on your side when facing 20-foot swells. One of the earliest recorded voyages was that of the legendary Norse explorer Nadard, who accidentally stumbled upon Iceland around 860 AD. Imagine setting sail for the Hebrides and instead landing on a volcanic island you didn't even know existed. Later, in 982 AD, Eric the Red, an Icelandic Norseman, was banished for a litany of crimes that included murder. When life gives you exile, you find Greenland, apparently. Eric the Red's discovery led to the establishment of Norse settlements there. A harsh, icy land, but to Eric's credit, he marketed it well. Calling a frozen expanse Greenland was a savvy move to lure settlers. If only he had a marketing degree. Speaking of marketing, the Vikings were savvy traders, swapping goods like walrus ivory, furs, and amber. Trading routes stretched from the cold reaches of the North Atlantic to the bustling bazaars of Baghdad. They were the original globetrotters, connecting disparate parts of the medieval world. But let's not romanticize it too much. These voyages were perilous. Imagine navigating without GPS or even a basic map, just the sun, stars, and maybe a raven or two to point you in the right direction. Now, the Viking longship wasn't just a means of transport, it was a community on water. You'd be crammed together with your fellow crew members, enduring the elements, relying on each other for survival. It was a test of endurance, camaraderie, and, let's be honest, tolerance for bardy odor. But this close-knit environment built strong bonds, which were crucial when you're hundreds of miles from home, battling the whims of the ocean. The Vikings' ability to read natural signs was unparalleled. They interpreted the flight patterns of birds, the color of the water, and even the taste of the sea to navigate. This deep connection with nature was both their compass and their guidebook. And of course, there's that famous sunstone, a mythical crystal said to help locate the sun on cloudy days. Whether it was real or a bit of Norse legend, it adds to the aura of mystery surrounding their navigational prowess. By the time you're settled into the rhythm of the sea, you realize this isn't just about survival or riches. It's about the stories you'll tell, the legacy you'll leave, and the lands you'll claim. The North Atlantic isn't just a passage to new territories. It's a proving ground for those daring enough to embrace its challenges. As the horizon stretches endlessly before you, you understand why the Vikings were more than raiders. They were pioneers, driven by a need to explore, to discover, and to conquer the unknown. Now, speaking of embracing challenges, let's dive into what it really took for Vikings to survive the North Atlantic. Picture this. You're on a longship, hundreds of miles at sea, with no land in sight, and you're relying on some pretty basic tools and sheer Viking grit to get you where you need to go. The North Atlantic wasn't exactly a pleasure cruise. It was more like the world's original extreme sport, minus the GoPro footage. First off, let's talk navigation. Forget about fancy gadgets, or even the simplest of maps. These folks had to make do with what was available, mainly the natural world around them. We're talking sun compasses, which weren't as fancy as they sound. Essentially, these were just a stick and a flat surface, using the sun's shadow to help determine direction. They were surprisingly effective, though, when the sun decided to make an appearance. When it didn't, well, that's where the legendary sunstone comes in. Historians still debate whether it was real or just a bit of Norse myth-making, but the idea was a translucent crystal that could polarize light, allowing navigators to pinpoint the sun's position even on cloudy days. If it existed, it was like having a medieval GPS, albeit one that only worked sporadically. Then there were landmarks, coastal features that Vikings memorized and used as navigational aids. Think of it as creating a mental Google Maps from fjords and mountains. This method required an intimate knowledge of the terrain, which was passed down through generations, building a tradition of seamanship that was as much art as it was science. But navigation wasn't just about where you were going. It was also about avoiding where you didn't want to end up, like the many rocks and reefs ready to turn your longship into kindling. This is where experience came into play. Veteran sailors read the sea's color and texture, the presence of seabirds, and even the scent of the wind to steer clear of danger. It was a skill that required sharp senses and a good dose of intuition. One wrong move, and you could find yourself shipwrecked on some icy outcrop, wondering why you ever left the comfort of your fjord. Now, let's address the not-so-glamorous side of Viking voyages, living conditions aboard those longships. Imagine spending weeks at sea in an open boat with no cabin, no privacy, and no real way to escape your crewmates. It was less luxury cruise, more survival camp. The longship's design was brilliant for speed and maneuverability, but creature comforts, not so much. You ate, slept, and did everything else under the open sky. When the weather was kind, that was a scenic adventure. When it wasn't, well, you'd better hope your cloak was waterproof. Food preservation was another challenge. The Vikings weren't packing gourmet meals. They relied on preserved foods like dried fish and meats, often salted or smoked to withstand the harsh conditions. They also carried hardy grains, and if they were lucky, some fresh game or foraged goods picked up along the way. But let's face it, after weeks at sea, even the most seasoned Viking probably got a bit tired of the same salty fare. The lack of vitamin C didn't help much either, often leading to scurvy in the less fortunate crews. Not exactly the picture of a balanced diet. And then there was the weather. North Atlantic has a personality as volatile as a reality TV star. One minute, it's smooth sailing, and the next, you're battling gale-force winds and waves that would send Poseidon himself running for cover. The sagas are filled with tales of ships lost to storms or dashed against rocks. These weren't embellishments. They were the harsh realities of seafaring life. Every voyage was a gamble, and the odds weren't always in your favor. But for the Vikings, the risk was worth the reward. The promise of new lands, untapped resources, and trade opportunities kept them pushing forward. They were entrepreneurs in their way, with the ocean as their marketplace. And while we romanticize their voyages today, it's crucial to remember they were driven by necessity as much as adventure. Crowded homelands and scarce resources meant finding new territories wasn't just a dream, it was a survival strategy. Take the tale of Floki Vilgerthason, for example. He set sail from Norway around 865 AD, reportedly bringing 3 ravens to help guide him to Iceland. The first raven returned, the second flew up and back, but the third led him to land. It's a classic saga story, but also an example of the Vikings' ingenuity. When technology fails, improvise with nature's tools. In these voyages, the Vikings demonstrated a profound respect for the natural world, seeing it not just as an adversary, but also as a partner in their journey. Their ability to read and respond to the environment was key to their survival. And when the seas were calm and the skies clear, those moments of tranquility were a reminder of why they ventured out in the first place, to explore, to conquer, and to marvel at the world's vastness. So there you are, standing on the deck, wind in your hair, the sun dipping below the horizon. It's a scene that's both timeless and ephemeral, a moment that captures the essence of the Viking spirit. The North Atlantic may be unforgiving, but for these seafarers, each voyage was a testament to human resilience and the unyielding drive to discover what lies beyond the next wave. The journey was often perilous, the rewards uncertain, but the stories they brought back were priceless, ensuring their place in history as the original masters of the sea. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rebellion and promise, you realize that Viking exploration wasn't just a pastime. It was a well-oiled machine driven by a complex web of social and political structures. You see, these weren't just random guys jumping on boats for a weekend raid. Nope, Viking expeditions were more like a medieval startup venture, complete with funding rounds, leadership hierarchies, and a penchant for risk-taking. At the top of this Norse food chain were the chieftains and kings, the venture capitalists of the Viking Age. These guys weren't just sitting around counting their hoards of silver. They were the brains behind the brawns, orchestrating voyages with the precision of a maestro. You had folks like King Harold Fairhair, who unified Norway around 872 AD and subsequently set his sights on the wealth lying beyond his shores. Harold wasn't just a guy with a fancy title. He was a strategic visionary, leveraging his control to encourage and support these expeditions. The political landscape was as turbulent as the North Atlantic, and power was the currency of choice. But why did these leaders invest their resources in such perilous ventures? Let's break it down. First, there was the undeniable lure of economic incentives. The Viking economy was as diverse as a modern stock portfolio. We're talking plunder, trade, settlement, and tribute, all viable streams of income. The promise of riches was a siren call, and these leaders knew a successful raid could line their pockets and strengthen their rule. It was like hitting the medieval jackpot, and who doesn't want to win big? The myth of Vikings as savage raiders isn't entirely unfounded, but it's only half the story. Sure, they could storm a monastery faster than you can say, Lindisfarne, but they also knew how to haggle like seasoned traders. The Norsemen were savvy merchants, exchanging goods like furs, amber, and walrus ivory for silver, spices, and textiles. The trade networks they established were as far-reaching as any modern-day multinational corporation, spanning from the icy shores of Greenland to the warm markets of the Mediterranean. Talk about a global enterprise. Trade wasn't just about acquiring wealth, it was a means of cultural exchange. The Vikings absorbed and disseminated ideas, technologies, and even fashion trends across continents. They were cultural chameleons, adapting to and influencing the societies they encountered. Forget the horned helmets. Picture silk garments from the East meeting Norse practicality in a unique fusion of style. They were the influencers of their time, minus the Instagram filters. Now, let's not sugarcoat the reality of Viking raids. Yes, they pillaged and plundered, but to paint them solely as marauders is like saying rock stars only smash guitars. The truth is more nuanced. Raiding was a means to an end, a way to gain resources and prestige. It was risky, yes, but the potential rewards were worth the gamble. A successful raid could elevate a warrior's status and fill the coffers of his chieftain. It was the original high-stakes game of chance, with lives and livelihoods on the line. On the flip side, many Vikings were settlers, looking to establish new homes in foreign lands. This wasn't just about finding a plot of land where the grass was greener, or, at least, where there was grass at all. Settling was a strategic move to secure resources and expand influence. The Norse established colonies in places like Iceland, Greenland, and even parts of what we now call the British Isles. These settlements weren't just footnotes in history. They were integral to the cultural and economic fabric of medieval Europe. And let's talk about the role of community in these expeditions. The social structure of Viking society was a finely tuned hierarchy where loyalty and honor were paramount. The concept of drengskaper, or warrior honor, was the bedrock of their culture. Bonds of kinship and allegiance to a chieftain or king were stronger than the toughest iron, and these relationships were crucial in organizing and executing expeditions. You didn't just need ships and swords, you needed a crew that had your back, come hell or high water. The Viking legal system also played a role in expedition planning. The Thing, a sort of open-air parliament, was where disputes were settled and decisions were made. It was a blend of democracy and oligarchy, where free men could voice their opinions, but only if their standing warranted it. Here, plans for raids and settlements could be proposed, debated, and sanctioned. It was like a medieval town hall meeting, only with more axes and fewer PowerPoint presentations. So, what does this all mean in the grand tapestry of history? The Vikings were more than just seafaring warriors. They were a society driven by ambition, innovation, and a keen understanding of the world's possibilities. Their expeditions were a testament to their adaptability and vision. They saw the horizon not as an end, but as the beginning of new opportunities. Yet, for all their achievements, the Viking Age was also a period of transition. As they settled in new lands, they integrated with local cultures, influencing and being influenced in turn. Their legacy is a complex one, woven into the very fabric of European history. The Norse spirit of exploration and enterprise left an indelible mark, one that continues to captivate our imaginations today. In our next installment, we'll dive deeper into the impact of Viking settlements on the lands they colonized and explore how their legacy shaped the medieval world. From cultural exchanges to clashes of civilizations, the story of the Vikings is far from over. So, Stay tuned, because the adventure is just getting started. As we sail deeper into the Viking saga, let's tackle the whole notion of these Norsemen as isolated islanders. Spoiler alert, Vikings were anything but loners drifting aimlessly in the medieval backwaters. Their reach extended far beyond the icy fjords and rugged coastlines of Scandinavia, stretching across continents like the world's first linked-in network, only with more swords and less small talk. Kicking things off with Greenland, the ultimate icy misnomer. Eric the Red, that marketing genius with a penchant for naming frozen wastelands with verdant titles, established settlements here around 985 AD. This wasn't just a whimsical adventure. It was a calculated move, driven by overcrowding back in Iceland and a touch of wanderlust. The Greenland settlements, including the eastern and western settlements, housed around 3,000 Norse souls at their peak. And let's be real, when your options are limited to volcanic Iceland or glacial Greenland, you learn to love the cold. These settlers braved brutal climates, relying on a mix of farming, hunting, and trading to make ends meet. Walrus tusks were the Greenland currency, traded like medieval Bitcoin in European markets. But here's where it gets interesting. Far from being isolated, the Greenlanders were part of an extensive trade web. They exchanged goods with Europe, shipping out furs, hides, and those precious walrus tusks. In return, they received iron, timber, and luxury goods like silk. Yes, silk. Imagine decked-out Viking chiefs in their Norse bling, strutting around in fabric that had traveled thousands of miles. It's like rocking a designer label, only with a bit more frostbite. Now, let's talk Vinland. Around the year 1000, Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red, made his legendary voyage westward, landing in what he called Vinland, believed to be part of modern-day Newfoundland. Leif and his crew weren't just on a scenic tour, they were looking for fertile lands and trade opportunities. And what did they find? Grapes, or at least that's what the sagas say. Vinland was allegedly lush with resources, a stark contrast to the icy grips of Greenland. However, the Vinland settlements didn't last. Why? Let's chalk it up to the local residents, the indigenous peoples. The Norse sagas call them Skraelings, a term that's about as politically correct as a Viking raid. Relations were, shall we say, rocky. Initial trade soon gave way to conflict, and despite their seafaring prowess, the Vikings weren't prepared for the organized resistance they encountered. They packed up and left, but not without leaving behind traces of their presence. Fast forward to the 1960, when archaeologists unearthed the Elance Orks Meadows site in Newfoundland. This site provided solid evidence of Norse presence in North America, complete with the remains of sod houses and workshops. It's like stumbling upon a medieval heirloom, complete with Nordic amenities. The site, dating back to roughly 1000 AD, confirmed that the Vikings had indeed set foot on North American soil, centuries before Columbus. Take that, Chris. These archaeological finds challenged the stereotype of Vikings as isolated marauders. Instead, they were part of a complex web of cultural exchange. They absorbed elements from the peoples they encountered and left their mark, albeit briefly. The Norse influence in Vinland may have been fleeting, but it was significant enough to ripple through history, like a stone cast into a pond. So what does this all mean for our horned-helmeted friends? Well, for starters, they were far more integrated into the medieval world than we often give them credit for. They weren't just raiders. They were traders, settlers, and dare I say, cultural ambassadors. Sure, their methods were occasionally harsh. Just ask any medieval monk. But their impact was undeniable. The Norse trade networks and settlements were instrumental in connecting disparate regions. They facilitated the flow of goods, ideas, and technology, acting as catalysts for change in a world that was evolving faster than you can say, longship. They were the original global citizens, navigating cultural boundaries with the same skill they used to navigate the seas. And let's not overlook the exchange of ideas. The Vikings, ever the practical folk, adopted useful technologies and customs from the cultures they encountered. From shipbuilding techniques to agricultural practices, they were like sponges, soaking up whatever worked and leaving the rest. This adaptability was key to their survival and success in foreign lands. Yet, for all their achievements, the Vikings were still a product of their time. They were shaped by a world where the line between trade and raid was as thin as a Norse blade. Their stories, both the romantic and the brutal, are woven into the very fabric of history. like threads in a tapestry that's as vibrant as it is complex. So, as we wrap up this leg of our Viking journey, remember that the Norse legacy is one of both disruption and connection. They were not the isolated marauders of myth, but dynamic players on the medieval stage, navigating the unpredictable seas of history with a boldness that continues to inspire. And while their settlements in Greenland and Vinland may have faded, the echoes of their voyages still resonate today, reminding us that exploration is as much about the journey as the destination. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the Viking legacy, exploring how their interactions with diverse cultures left an indelible mark on the medieval world. There's more to this saga, and the adventure is far from over. And speaking of sagas, let's break down what the Viking legacy really means for medieval Europe and beyond. First off, let's dispense with the romanticized image of Vikings as mere roving raiders. Sure, they had their fair share of pillaging parties, but these folks were as much about shaping societies as they were about shaking them up. One of the most significant legacies the Vikings left behind was their role in the formation of new political entities. Take Normandy, for instance. This region of France owes its name and much of its cultural DNA to Norse settlers. In 911 AD, a Viking leader named Rollo struck a deal with King Charles the Simple of West Francia. In exchange for protection against other Viking marauders, Rollo was granted land, which he cleverly called Normandy, literally, land of the Northmen. Fast forward to 1066, and Rollo's descendant, William the Conqueror, would launch a little venture known as the Norman Conquest of England. Talk about a legacy with staying power. But it wasn't just about political muscle. The Vikings were instrumental in reshaping the economic landscape of Europe. Their trade networks connected the darts between the East and the West, and they were like the medieval Amazon Prime, minus the overnight delivery, but full of surprises. From the bustling trade posts of Birka in Sweden to the distant reaches of Constantinople, Vikings transported goods, ideas, and occasionally people. Silver coins from the Islamic caliphates found their way into Viking hordes, while Norse goods like timber and pelts traveled south. This exchange fueled economic growth and cultural interaction, two things we often take for granted but were revolutionary back then. Now, let's dive into one of the most pervasive myths surrounding the Vikings and why it sticks around like a catchy pop song. The horned helmets. Spoiler, they didn't wear them. This bit of costume drama comes courtesy of 19th century opera and romantic art, which painted them as larger-than-life warriors. And while the helmets might be fake, the myth captures the imagination because it plays into our love for the dramatic, the fierce, and the fantastical. We crave heroes with horns, not because it's historically accurate, but because it's a great story to tell. The Viking Age also left us with some pretty compelling lessons about resilience and adaptability. These were people who thrived in some of the harshest environments on Earth, often with little more than their wits and a sturdy longship. They adapted to new lands with a flexibility that was as much about survival as it was about success. They didn't just conquer, they assimilated, intermarried, and integrated. And in doing so, they left a cultural footprint that's still visible today. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Viking legacy is their legal and social structure, which was surprisingly democratic for its time. Norse assemblies, known as things, were gatherings where free men could voice their opinions and settle disputes. It wasn't a perfect system. Women and slaves were notably excluded, but it was a step toward more participatory governance. This concept of communal decision-making would echo through the ages, influencing political systems long after the Viking longships had stopped sailing. But let's not gloss over the darker side of Viking life. Slavery was a grim reality, with raids often resulting in the capture and sale of people as commodities. It's a brutal reminder that while the Norse were explorers and traders, they were also participants in the darker aspects of human history. Yet, it's this complexity, this mix of the admirable and the abhorrent, that makes their story so compelling. As we reflect on the Viking saga, it's clear that their impact reverberates through history, not just because of their dramatic raids or legendary leaders, but because they were pioneers in a world that was still finding its way. They navigated the uncertain waters of change with a boldness that's both inspiring and cautionary. The myth may paint them as larger-than-life figures, but the reality is that they were human, grappling with the same challenges of survival, identity, and legacy that we face today. So, as you drift off, perhaps imagining the creak of a longship's hull or the distant call of a seabird, consider this. The Vikings remind us that history is a tapestry of adventure, adversity, and adaptation. Their stories endure not just because they conquered lands, but because they navigated the human experience with a resilience that still resonates. In a world that's always on the brink of the next wave, maybe that's the lesson we need most. If you think your job is tough, imagine being Nikola Tesla, who arrived in America in 1884 with an engineering degree, 4 cents in his pocket, and the kind of dreams that make reality seem like a rude awakening. Born in Smiljan, Croatia, in 1856, Tesla was the kind of kid who'd rather play with lightning than Legos. If they'd had Legos in the 19th century, that is. From a young age, he was obsessed with electricity, which is an unusual fixation for anyone who isn't a mad scientist. But let's just say Tesla wore that label with pride. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, or rather, the elephant in the lab, Tesla's compulsive habits. This guy had a thing for the number 3 that makes people with OCD look like casual hobbyists. He'd walk 3 times around a block before entering a building, and if something wasn't divisible by 3, well, just didn't make the cut. But hey, who's to say this quirky arithmetic didn't feed his genius? After all, it's a fine line between madness and brilliance, and Tesla danced on it like a pro. Tesla's move to America, funded by those 4 shiny pennies, was not exactly the classic rags-to-riches tale you might expect. Forget the glamorous notion of stepping off a boat onto the streets of New York with stars in his eyes. It was more like stepping into a gritty circus. He started off digging ditches for $2 a day, a job that was exactly as glamorous as it sounds. But you've got to hand it to him. He didn't lose his spark. Quite literally, he was the guy you wanted around when the lights went out. Eventually, he landed a gig working for none other than Thomas Edison. Yes, *, Thomas Edison, the wizard of Menlo Park, the man who'd later become Tesla's biggest frenemy. Edison, known for his practical inventions and ruthless business acumen, hired Tesla to improve his DC direct current generators. Edison promised Tesla $50,000, about $1, $4 million today, if he could make them more efficient. Spoiler alert, Tesla did it. But when he asked for his cash, Edison reportedly laughed it off, saying, "Tesla, you don't understand our American humor." Talk about a shocking development. Let's pause here and think about this. Tesla was working tirelessly on the promise of a fortune, only to get a paycheck that left him feeling utterly powerless. It was the kind of betrayal that could make anyone want to throw in the towel, but Tesla was nothing if not persistent. He eventually left Edison's company, taking with him some life-altering lessons and a stubborn resolve to make alternating current, AC, the standard. AC, unlike Edison's beloved DC, could travel long distances without losing voltage, proving once again that Tesla was miles ahead, literally. While Tesla's genius was undeniable, his social skills were, let's say, a bit more eclectic. He didn't believe in shaking hands because of a fear of germs. Long before that was trendy, and he was known to entertain guests with impromptu demonstrations of electrical phenomena. Picture him lighting electric bulbs without wires while casually discussing the weather. Pretty electrifying, huh? In the end, Tesla's early struggles in America didn't extinguish his fiery ambition. Instead, they fueled his drive to innovate, to push boundaries, and to light up our world in ways Edison couldn't even dream of. So next time you flip a switch, send a thought of gratitude to the man who not only valued the number 3, but also turned the tide in the war of currents. Tesla may have started with a few coins, but his legacy, priceless. So, there we have it. Tesla was lighting up the world, while Edison's DC was flickering like a candle in the wind. These two titans were locked in what history lovingly calls the War of the Currents. It was like the 19th century version of a tech startup battle, but instead of apps and gadgets, they were duking it out with miles of copper wire and the future of electricity at stake. Tesla's AC system was revolutionary because it could travel great distances without losing energy, a feat that Edison's DC just couldn't pull off. Imagine trying to light up a city with DC. You'd need a power station every mile or so. AC, on the other hand, could stretch itself like a yoga instructor, reaching far and wide without a voltage drop. In fact, In 1896, Tesla's AC power system was used to harness the mighty Niagara Falls, transmitting electricity over 26 miles to Buffalo, New York. That's the kind of long-distance relationship that works. But here's the rub. Edison wasn't going down without a fight. He was a man of many talents, including a knack for dirty tactics. Edison's campaign against AC was like a political smear job. He went so far as to electrocute animals publicly to show how dangerous AC was. That's right, Edison was zapping elephants and dogs to prove a point. If that sounds like a bad PR strategy, it was. But to give credit where it's due, Edison had a way of capturing the public's attention, albeit through rather shocking methods. Despite these theatrics, the practicality of AC couldn't be denied. Tesla's system was cheaper, more efficient, and far more effective at powering the buzzing urban landscapes sprouting across America. By the late 1890, AC had essentially won the war, and Edison's DC was left behind like a forgotten relic. But don't feel too sorry for Edison. His name was still being slapped on every light bulb in town. Now, about Tesla and his pigeons. If you think modern tech geniuses are eccentric, Tesla was the original blueprint. He had a soft spot for pigeons, treating them like feathery confidants. He once said he loved one particular pigeon as a man loves a woman. That's not a metaphor, that's Tesla for you. His affection for these birds was no passing fancy. He reportedly spent thousands of dollars nursing injured pigeons back to health. Imagine being his accountant, trying to balance the books while Tesla's feeding breadcrumbs to his winged buddies. But let's not pigeonhole Tesla as just a bird enthusiast. The man knew how to put on a show. His public demonstrations were legendary. He'd light up fluorescent tubes by holding them in his hands, with electricity passing through his body like he was some kind of human light fixture. And he did it all without a hair out of place, which, considering his infamous germophobia and fastidious nature, was probably a matter of personal pride. Tesla's flair for the dramatic was part of his genius. He understood that capturing the public's imagination wasn't just about being right. It was about being unforgettable. And let's face it, who wouldn't remember a guy who could literally light up a room with his body? These demonstrations were more than just spectacle. They were Tesla's way of proving that AC wasn't just safe, but mind-bogglingly cool. But behind the dazzling displays and the pigeon love stories, there was a stark reality. Tesla was a visionary, sure, but not exactly a business whiz. While Edison was busy building an empire, Tesla was more concerned with the next big idea than with financial stability. It's the age-old tale. Genius inventor, lousy accountant. His lack of business acumen meant that while his ideas lit up the world, his pocketbook often remained in the dark. However, Tesla's legacy isn't defined by his bank balance. It's carved into the very infrastructure of modern society. The war between AC and DC wasn't just a battle of electrical currents. It was a clash of ideologies. It was about vision versus practicality, long-term potential versus immediate gains. And though Tesla didn't walk away with the financial windfall, he left something far more enduring, a pathway to the future. As we leave Tesla here, poised at the pinnacle of the AC victory, remember that the story is far from over. There's more to Tesla than electricity and eccentricities. Next up, we'll delve into his later inventions and the quirky, sometimes tragic twists that marked his later years. So, stay tuned, because the current of Tesla's life had many more volts to give. As we leave Tesla here, poised at the pinnacle of the AC victory, remember that the story is far from over. There's more to Tesla than electricity and eccentricities. Next up, we'll delve into his later inventions and the quirky, sometimes tragic twists that marked his later years. So, stay tuned, because the current of Tesla's life had many more volts to give. Tesla was riding high on the AC wave, but he wasn't doing it alone. Enter George Westinghouse, the industrialist with a knack for sparring talent, and more importantly, the financial muscle to back it. Westinghouse was to Tesla what the battery pack is to your smartphone, essential for keeping things running. Westinghouse saw in Tesla not just a brilliant inventor, but the key to unlocking a new era of electrical power. The partnership was like a dynamic duo of innovation. Tesla's vision and Westinghouse's resources were about to light up the world, literally. Now, let's fast forward to the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. This was no ordinary fair. It was the ultimate showcase of human achievement, celebrating the 400th anniversary of Columbus's voyage, albeit a year late because, honestly, who counts when you're making history? The exposition was a sprawling affair, covering over 600 acres with more than 200 buildings. But the real star of the show was electricity. And who was in the spotlight? You guessed it, our man Tesla and his AC power system. Westinghouse had snagged the contract to illuminate the fair, and it was nothing short of electrifying. The fairgrounds were lit up with over 100 000 incandescent lamps, running on AC power. Picture this. The night sky of Chicago ablaze with light, while the rest of the world was still fumbling around with gas lamps and candles. It was a spectacle that left the public awestruck, and competitors like Edison a little hot under the collar. AC power had not just arrived. It had stolen the show, proving once and for all that Tesla's system was the future. But Tesla wasn't just about lighting up fairs. He had bigger fish to fry, or should I say, bigger waterfalls to harness. Enter the Niagara Falls Power Project, a feat of engineering that would make even the most seasoned builder break out in a cold sweat. In 1896, Tesla's AC power system was used to transmit electricity from Niagara Falls to Buffalo, New York, over 26 miles away. This wasn't just a local power solution. It was a blueprint for electrifying entire cities. It was as if Tesla had bottled the power of nature and sent it down a wire. The project's success was a testament to Tesla's genius and Westinghouse's business savvy, a combo that kept the lights on and the innovation rolling. Now, let's take a detour into the realm of wireless communication. Tesla, ever the visionary, was already dreaming up ways to send electricity through the air. He envisioned a world where information could be transmitted without wires, a concept that was as futuristic then as flying cars are today. In 1898, during an electrical exhibition in Madison Square Garden, Tesla demonstrated a remote-controlled boat, which he dubbed Teleormat. People were flabbergasted, suspecting he had trained a tiny army of mice inside the boat. But no, it was just good old electromagnetic waves doing the trick. Tesla's ideas were light years ahead, but they weren't just light years. They were costly years, too. He poured his resources into building a high-voltage, high-frequency power generator in Colorado Springs in 1899, where he conducted experiments that were both groundbreaking and eyebrow-raising. His goal, to create a global wireless transmission system, but in the process, he managed to accidentally blow out the power in the entire town. Oops, who knew that testing theories could come with a side of municipal blackouts? Speaking of extraterrestrial endeavors, let's not forget Tesla's infamous attempts to communicate with Martians. Yes, you read that right, Martians. Tesla was convinced that his wireless experiments had picked up signals from another planet. While most of us might chalk that up to static, Tesla saw it as a cosmic conversation starter. It was the kind of ambition that made people question his sanity, but in a way that kept them intrigued. After all, who wouldn't want to be the first to chat with little green men? Tesla's work in wireless communication laid the groundwork for future innovations, even if he didn't get to see them fully realized. But let's be real. The man was playing chess while the rest of the world was still figuring out checkers. He was the kind of visionary who saw possibilities where others saw impossibilities, and that made him both a genius and, at times, a misunderstood maverick. Back in his New York lab, Tesla was known for his unconventional experiments. He had a penchant for high-voltage demonstrations that would make a pyrotechnician blush. Imagine sparks flying, lights flashing, and Tesla standing in the middle of it all, unfazed and probably thinking about his next big idea. His lab was a veritable theater of electricity, complete with a Tesla coil that could produce bolts of lightning. It was like a rock concert for science geeks, with Tesla as the headliner. Despite his groundbreaking work, Tesla often found himself in financial straits. His focus on innovation over income meant that while his ideas were priceless, his bank account was often empty. It was the classic tale of a brilliant mind shackled by the mundane realities of economics. But if Tesla was worried, he didn't show it. He was too busy dreaming up the next big thing to dwell on the bottom line. So, as we leave Tesla amidst his lightning shows and Martian messages, remember that the story is far from over. There's more to explore in the enigmatic life of Nikola Tesla, a man whose brilliance was matched only by his eccentricity. In our next chapter, we'll delve into the later years of Tesla's life, where the line between genius and madness became even blurrier. Stay tuned, because this current is still flowing strong. As Tesla dazzled the world with his lightning shows and cosmic fantasies, the stage was set for his most audacious venture yet, the Wardenclyffe Tower. Picture this, a 187-foot behemoth of a structure standing tall in Long Island, New York, in the early 1900s. This wasn't just any old tower. It was Tesla's dream of transmitting wireless energy across the globe. The blueprint was as ambitious as it was visionary. Tesla imagined a world where electricity was as free and omnipresent as the air we breathe. No wires, no strings attached, just pure, unadulterated energy zipping across continents. But let's get real. Grand visions require equally grand pockets, and Tesla's were more like the ones you'd find on a pair of well-worn jeans, practically empty. The Wardenclyffe project began in 1901 with financial backing from none other than J.P. Morgan, the financial titan with a penchant for funding transformative ideas. Morgan chipped in $150,000, roughly $4.5 million today, expecting a world-altering return on investment. However, as with all things Tesla, the pursuit of innovation quickly outpaced financial feasibility. The economic context of the time didn't help. The early 1900s were a period of rapid industrialization, but also of cutthroat competition and economic instability. And Tesla, always the dreamer, wasn't exactly a master of the business game. As construction of the tower dragged on, costs ballooned and Morgan's interest waned faster than a shooting star. By 1904, the financial lifeline was cut, leaving Tesla to grapple with unpaid debts and a half-finished tower that loomed over the landscape like a monument to unfulfilled potential. Wardenclyffe was more than just a financial gamble. It became a magnet for skepticism and ridicule. Critics were quick to label Tesla's wireless energy dreams as fanciful flights of fancy. In an era where the light bulb was still a novelty to many, the idea of wireless electricity seemed like science fiction. Tesla, ever the optimist, pressed on, but the economic realities were as harsh as a New York winter. By 1917, the tower was demolished, a victim of unpaid taxes and mounting debts. The dream, however, lingered on, a testament to Tesla's unyielding belief in the impossible. Now, let's take a detour into the realm of myths and legends, because what's history without a little spice? Tesla, with his penchant for the dramatic, became the subject of countless tales, some as electrifying as his inventions, others as dubious as a politician's promise. Among these was the infamous death ray, a supposed weapon of mass destruction that could annihilate armies with a flick of a switch. The idea of Tesla as a proto-supervillain is tantalizing, but the truth is more mundane. Tesla did propose a teleforce weapon, claiming it could bring down enemy aircraft or end all war. However, his prototypes never materialized, and the project remained more speculation than reality. Then there's the notion of Tesla dabbling in time travel. Yes, you read that right. According to some, Tesla's experiments in high-frequency and high-voltage electricity were not just about lighting up bulbs, but unlocking the secrets of time itself. While it's a compelling narrative, it's as fictional as a Hollywood blockbuster. Tesla's work was groundbreaking, but it didn't involve hopping into a DeLorean and speeding into the past or future. The man was a visionary, not a time lord. Despite these myths, or perhaps because of them, Tesla's later years were marked by a curious blend of genius and eccentricity. He continued to tinker away, oscillating between groundbreaking ideas and financial instability. His New York hotel room became a makeshift lab, where he entertained guests with stories of future inventions and his ongoing obsession with pigeons. Tesla's fascination with these birds was no secret. He fed them, cared for them, and even claimed to communicate with them on some metaphysical level. It was the kind of quirk that made him both endearing and enigmatic, a man of science with a heart for his feathered friends. Financial woes plagued Tesla until the end. He was awarded several patents and accolades, but they did little to alleviate his monetary struggles. By the time the Great Depression rolled around, Tesla was living off a modest pension provided by the Westinghouse Corporation, a gesture of goodwill for the man whose inventions had revolutionized the electrical industry. It was a bittersweet arrangement, a reminder of how the currents of commerce had often left Tesla adrift. And yet, Tesla's legacy was anything but dim. He was a man who dreamed in volts and thought in frequencies, a maverick who saw possibilities where others saw impossibilities. His work laid the foundation for modern wireless communication, and his ideas continue to inspire generations of inventors and dreamers. The Wardenclyffe Tower may have crumbled, but the vision it embodied, of a world interconnected by invisible lines of energy, remains a beacon for future innovation. So, as we leave Tesla here, caught between myth and reality, remember that his story is far from over. There's more to explore in the enigmatic life of Nikola Tesla, a man whose brilliance was matched only by his eccentricity. In our next chapter, we'll delve into the later years of Tesla's life, where the line between genius and madness became even blurrier. Stay tuned, because this current is still flowing strong. Tesla's story isn't just a historical account, it's a saga of ambition, vision, and the occasional pigeon. As we wade through his legacy, it's essential to recognize how his life continues to pulse through modern technology like a hidden current. Sure, Tesla's financial acumen was about as sharp as a spoon, but his ideas were cutting edge, providing a blueprint for the technological landscape we navigate today. Fast forward to the 21st century, and Tesla's name is practically synonymous with innovation. The electric car company, Tesla Inc., founded in 2003, is a nod to his pioneering work in electricity. Elon Musk, the company's outspoken CEO, has often cited Nikola Tesla as an inspiring figure, a genius whose ideas were ahead of their time, much like Musk's own visions of Mars and beyond. It's as if the spirit of Tesla has been reincarnated in sleek electric vehicles zipping around city streets, proving that his influence is as enduring as it is electrifying. But Tesla's impact isn't confined to the automotive world. It stretches into the realms of wireless communication, too. The smartphone in your pocket, capable of connecting you to the world in an instant, owes a debt to Tesla's early work in wireless technology. He imagined a global network long before the internet was a twinkle in anyone's eye, an interconnected web of communication and power that would make even the most ambitious Silicon Valley startup blush. Yet, Tesla's legacy isn't just about the gadgets and gizmos. It's about the way he captured the imagination of society. Hollywood and pop culture have latched onto Tesla's mystique with the tenacity of a terrier on a bone. Movies like The Prestige and TV shows like Doctor Who have painted Tesla as an enigmatic genius, a figure shrouded in mystery and eccentricity. His life story is a narrative ripe for dramatic retelling, blending the allure of genius with the pathos of personal struggle. Comic books, too, have embraced Tesla's larger-than-life persona. He's been depicted as everything from a superhero to a mad scientist, each iteration playing on the tantalizing idea of a man who could wield the power of lightning. It's a testament to Tesla's enduring appeal that his life continues to be reimagined in the pages of fiction, where the lines between reality and fantasy blur as easily as Tesla's alternating currents. Despite the romantic allure of these portrayals, let's not forget the reality behind the legend. Tesla's life was a cautionary tale wrapped in the guise of inspiration. He was a visionary who often found himself at odds with the practicalities of the world around him. His brilliance was matched by a naivete that left him vulnerable to exploitation and financial ruin. The man who dreamed of transmitting free energy across the globe died alone and penniless in a New York hotel room in 1943, a poignant reminder that genius doesn't always come with a safety net. Yet, in death, Tesla's influence has only grown. The resurgence of interest in his work has sparked a re-evaluation of his contributions to science and technology. Scholars and enthusiasts alike have pored over his patents and writings, uncovering a treasure trove of ideas that were simply too far ahead of their time. As society finally catches up to Tesla's vision, his contributions are being recognized not just for their scientific value, but for their ability to inspire future generations. At the heart of Tesla's story is a deeply human element, a man whose dreams were as boundless as the cosmos he sought to understand. He was a solitary figure, often misunderstood, yet fiercely committed to his vision of a better world. His love of pigeons, often ridiculed, speaks to a softer side of Tesla, a man who found solace and companionship in the simplest of creatures. In Central Park, feeding birds, Tesla found a connection that perhaps eluded him in his human interactions, a poignant reflection on the nature of genius and loneliness. As we conclude this journey through Tesla's life, let's carry forward his legacy with a sense of wonder and caution. He was a man who dared to dream big, who saw the potential for a world connected by invisible lines of energy and communication. His story is a reminder that innovation often comes with a price, but it also holds the promise of a brighter, more connected future. So next time you switch on a light, charge your electric car, or send a message across the ether, spare a thought for Nikola Tesla, the man who dreamed in vaults and left a legacy that continues to light up our world. His life serves as both an inspiration and a cautionary tale, reminding us that while the pursuit of knowledge is noble, it is the application of that knowledge that truly illuminates. Tesla's journey from the shadows of financial obscurity to the spotlight of pop culture is a testament to his enduring impact, a legacy as electric as the currents he so masterfully harnessed. Cyrus the Great, the man, the myth, the empire builder, strides into our historical consciousness like he's just sashayed onto the floor of a Silicon Valley startup, ready to disrupt everything. Sure, we're talking about the mid-6th century BC here, not the latest tech conference, but the parallels are too juicy to resist. This guy didn't just shuffle the deck chairs on the Titanic. He built a whole new ship and sailed it straight to the top of the ancient world's pecking order. So, what's the deal with Cyrus? And how did he manage to turn a collection of feuding tribes into the world's first empire worthy of a Netflix special? Around 550 BC, Persia was a bit like a dysfunctional family reunion. Everyone had beef with someone else, and nobody could agree on a playlist. Enter Cyrus, charismatic fixer with a reputation for turning chaos into order, armed with a knack for diplomacy and a sword, or maybe it was just his winning personality. Cyrus set out to unify these squabbling factions. Now, before you start picturing a conquering hero in a shining chariot, let's get real. Cyrus wasn't just about the hugs and high fives. He had a strategic mind sharper than a Jinsu knife. His approach was a mix of diplomacy, marriage alliances, and when necessary, good old-fashioned military might. The guy knew when to bring the olive branch and when to bring the hammer. Take Lydia, for example. In 547 BC, Cyrus faced off against Croesus, the king famous for his wealth. Think Jeff Bezos-level rich, but with more gold and fewer rockets. The story goes that Croesus consulted the oracle at Delphi, who cryptically told him that if he attacked Persia, a great empire would fall. Spoiler alert, it was his own. Cyrus didn't just beat Croesus. He took over Lydia with such finesse that the region practically handed him the keys and said, "Welcome home." This brings us to the million-dollar question. Was Cyrus a liberator or a conqueror? Historical PR spin is a tricky beast, and Cyrus's team, if he had one, deserved a raise. To the Babylonians, he was the liberator who rolled into town in 539 BC and freed them from Nabonidus, a king so unpopular he made the current office villain look like a teddy bear. The Cyrus cylinder, often touted as the first charter of human rights, paints him as a benevolent leader who respected local customs and religions. But let's not kid ourselves. Cyrus wasn't just spreading peace and love. He was building an empire. And what an empire it was. By the time he was done, Cyrus's realm stretched from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River, covering some 3 million square miles. That's bigger than the Roman Empire at its peak, folks. The Persian Empire was like the ancient world's version of Amazon, massive, far-reaching, and with a cultural diversity that made a United Nations meeting look like a neighborhood BBQ. Cyrus's secret sauce was his ability to keep this sprawling empire running smoothly. Unlike your typical conqueror who just plunked down his own guys and called it a day, Cyrus was all about local governance. He allowed conquered peoples to keep their leaders, laws, and religions, provided they paid their taxes and didn't cause a ruckus. This policy of tolerance wasn't just smart, it was revolutionary. It's like he understood that happy subjects are less likely to revolt and more likely to pay their taxes on time. And speaking of taxes, let's talk economics. The Persian Empire was a financial powerhouse. Under Cyrus, the state controlled the minting of coins, which was a big deal in a world where bartering a goat for a sack of grain was still a thing. By standardizing currency, he facilitated trade across his vast territories and beyond. This was the ancient equivalent of setting up a streamlined payment system, making it easier for merchants to do business from Turkey to India. But let's not gloss over the harsh realities. For all the benevolent ruler vibes, running an empire had its dark side. The Persian military machine was no joke, and peace was often enforced at the point of a spear. Roads, like the famous Royal Road that spanned 677 miles from Sardis to Susa, weren't just for the convenience of travelers and merchants. They were vital for moving troops quickly to squash uprisings faster than you can say revolt. In the grand scheme of things, Cyrus's style was more carrot than stick, especially compared to some of his successors. But make no mistake, he wielded that stick when he had to. His ability to balance these approaches is why his empire didn't just survive, it thrived long after he was gone. Cyrus the Great wasn't merely a conqueror, he was a visionary, a strategist, and perhaps a bit of a PR genius. He laid the groundwork for what would become a cultural and political juggernaut under his successors, setting the stage for a golden age that would influence civilizations for centuries to come. As we ponder Cyrus's legacy, remember that history is often written by the victors. The Cyrus cylinder may sing his praises, but it's worth questioning how his contemporaries, especially those on the losing side, viewed his so-called liberation. Was he a benevolent ruler, or just another conqueror with a clever marketing campaign? The truth, as always, is likely somewhere in the middle, nuanced, complex and ripe for endless debate. But one thing's for sure, Cyrus didn't just change Persia, he changed the world. And that's a legacy that even the most ambitious modern-day CEO would envy. Speaking of changing the world, let's dive into the nuts and bolts of Cyrus's empire-building extravaganza. And boy, did this guy have a bag of tricks that would make even the most seasoned boardroom strategist take notes. First off, let's chat about his military strategies, the stuff of legends and late-night campfire tales. Cyrus's army was like the Swiss army knife of ancient warfare, versatile, efficient, and ready to handle any situation. Forget about the brute force tactics of some of his contemporaries. This guy was all about the finesse. He didn't just send a bunch of foot soldiers into battle willy-nilly. No, he carefully crafted a diverse military force that was as adaptable as it was formidable. Picture a coalition of archers, cavalry, and infantry, each playing their part in a well-oiled machine designed to conquer and hold vast territories. One of the crown jewels in Cyrus's strategic arsenal was his use of camels in the Battle of Thymbra against Croesus. Spoiler, turns out, horses are terrified of camels. Who knew? By employing these ship-of-the-desert creatures, Cyrus effectively freaked out the Lydian horses, causing chaos in their ranks and paving the way for a decisive victory. It was the ancient equivalent of bringing a cannon to a sword fight, and it worked like a charm. But Cyrus wasn't just about clever tactics. The man knew the importance of logistics. Imagine coordinating thousands of troops across thousands of miles without a single GPS or Google Maps in sight. It's the stuff of nightmares for any modern-day military planner. Yet, Cyrus managed to pull it off with a mix of savvy planning and sheer audacity. The Persian military was a mobile powerhouse, capable of traversing the empire's sprawling landscapes with surprising speed and efficiency. They didn't just march, they glided across territories, thanks to a network of supply lines and the Royal Road, which, let's face it, was the ancient version of the Autobahn. And let's not forget the Cyrus cylinder, a piece of baked clay that's as much a work of art as it is a masterclass in propaganda. Often hailed as the first charter of human rights, the cylinder is basically Cyrus's way of telling the world, hey, I'm not just a conqueror, I'm a liberator. It's a bold marketing move that would make any modern PR firm proud. The cylinder boasts of Cyrus's benevolence and respect for local customs and religions, portraying him as a ruler who's more about collaboration than subjugation. Of course, while the cylinder tells one story, the ground realities often sang a different tune. Conquest, especially ancient style, wasn't exactly a walk in the park. It was a grueling, grinding affair that took its toll on everyone involved. Cyrus's expansionist campaigns were marked by battles that left behind a trail of destruction and reshaped entire societies. The romantic idea of the benevolent conqueror is all well and good, but let's not kid ourselves. Building an empire meant breaking a few eggs, and sometimes those eggs were entire cities. Economic realities, also played a significant role in Cyrus's conquest. The Persian Empire's success wasn't just built on the strength of its armies, but also on its economic prowess. By controlling key trade routes and standardizing currency, Cyrus created a financial juggernaut that fueled further expansion. This wasn't just about amassing wealth. It was about creating a sustainable system that could support a vast empire. The wealth from conquered lands wasn't just hoarded. It was reinvested into the empire's infrastructure, ensuring a flow of resources that kept the Persian machine well-oiled and ready for action. Politically, Cyrus was a master of the balancing act. By allowing conquered territories to maintain a degree of autonomy, he fostered a sense of loyalty and stability within the empire. His policy of tolerance wasn't just a feel-good story. It was a calculated move to ensure long-term control and harmony. This approach allowed the Persian Empire to thrive in a way that few empires before it had managed, securing a legacy that would influence civilizations for centuries to come. Yet, for all his strategic brilliance, Cyrus also had to navigate the treacherous waters of ancient politics. Alliances were fragile, and betrayal was always a lurking threat. It was a game of thrones played out on a grand scale, with Cyrus deftly maneuvering through the complex web of relationships that defined the ancient world. His ability to maintain control over such a diverse and expansive empire is a testament to his political acumen and his understanding of human nature. So, was Cyrus a liberator, a conqueror, or a bit of both? The answer, much like the man himself, is complex. He was a visionary who saw the potential for a united empire and pursued it with relentless determination. But he was also a pragmatist who understood the harsh realities of the ancient world and wasn't afraid to wield power when necessary. His legacy is one of contrasts, a blend of enlightened leadership and ruthless ambition that reshaped the course of history. As we continue to explore the rise of the Persian Empire, remember that history is a tapestry woven from the threads of both triumph and tragedy. Cyrus's story is one of epic proportions, filled with moments of brilliance and brutality, of vision and violence. It's a reminder that the past is never as simple as it seems, and that the truth often lies somewhere in the messy middle. Stay tuned, because there's a lot more to uncover in the saga of the Persian Empire and its indomitable leaders. Now, as we transition from Cyrus, the Great's epic reign, brace yourself for a wild ride through the less polished chapters of the Persian Empire's illustrious history. Enter Cambyses Roman II, Cyrus's son, who took the imperial baton in 530 BC, ready to leave his mark on the world, or at least try to without tripping over his own feet. This guy's story isn't your usual hero's journey. It's more like a season of a reality show, complete with drama, scandal, and a few questionable decisions. Let's start with the high points, because, believe it or not, Cambyses did have some. He managed to conquer Egypt, a feat that had eluded many before him. In 525 BC, the Battle of Pelusium saw Cambyses pulling a move straight out of a psychological warfare playbook. Legend, or maybe just ancient gossip, says he leveraged the Egyptians' reverence for cats by marching into battle with felines painted on his shields, and even some live ones in tow. Who would have thought that the key to victory lay in the paws of a pet? It's not every day that a military strategy reads like a chapter from a How to Train Your Cat manual. But after the dust settled on Egypt's sandy battlefields, Cambyses' reign turned into something of a tragicomedy. Picture this: a ruler who conquered the land of the pharaohs but couldn't conquer his own demons. The empire expanded, sure, but Cambyses' grip on reality, not so much. He's often depicted in historical accounts as a tyrant whose paranoia and temper were as legendary as his father's diplomacy. Remember, this was long before you could blame your mood swings on too much coffee. Cambyses' erratic rule was marked by a litany of controversies. Historical records, particularly those from Herodotus, paint a picture of a king who went a bit off the rails. There's the infamous incident in which Cambyses allegedly killed the Apis bull, a sacred animal in Egypt, which didn't exactly win him any points with the locals. It's like going to a friend's house and smashing their heirloom vase. It's just not a great look. And then there's the infamous tale of his ill-fated expedition to the Ethiopian kingdom. Cambyses reportedly underestimated the logistical nightmare of marching an army across the deserts of North Africa. Without adequate supplies, his troops were forced to abandon the campaign, and some accounts even suggest they had to resort to cannibalism to survive. It's a case study in what not to do when planning a military venture, underscoring the importance of a well-stocked pantry. As if that weren't enough, Cambyses' personal life was a minefield of drama. There's the scandalous story of his marriage to his sister, which was frowned upon even by ancient standards. Sure, royal marriages back then were often more about politics than romance, but Cambyses took family ties to a whole new level, one that even reality TV producers would think twice about scripting. But the piece de resistance of Cambyses' reign is undoubtedly the tale of how he met his end. In 522 BC, while on his way back to Persia to deal with a rebellion led by a man claiming to be his brother Bardia, or Smerdes, Cambyses managed to stab himself in the thigh with his own sword. Talk about a dramatic exit. The wound turned septic, and that was the end of Cambyses Roman II, an emperor undone by his own blade. It's the kind of irony that makes Shakespearean tragedies look like feel-good comedies. Now, before we dismiss Cambyses as history's cautionary tale, let's take a moment to understand the pressures he faced. Ruling a sprawling empire wasn't exactly a walk in the hanging gardens of Babylon. The logistics alone were mind-boggling. Maintaining control over diverse cultures, from the Indus River to the Mediterranean, demanded a level of political acumen and patience that few possess. And while Cambyses may not have had the wisdom of Solomon, his challenges were very real. The economic realities of empire building were also daunting. The Persian Empire's vastness meant that resources were always stretched thin, and the need for constant expansion was as much about survival as it was about glory. The sprawling bureaucracy that Cyrus had set up needed to be fed, both literally and metaphorically, and that required a steady stream of tribute and taxes from the provinces. It was a delicate balancing act, like juggling flaming swords while riding a unicycle on a tightrope. So, was Cambyses a madman, or just a ruler overwhelmed by the enormity of his responsibilities? As with most historical figures, the truth likely lies somewhere between the extremes. His reign was a complex tapestry of ambition, missteps, and the harsh realities of ancient politics. It's easy to romanticize the past, but the day-to-day grind of empire management was anything but glamorous. As the dust settled on Cambyses' tumultuous reign, the Persian Empire stood at a crossroads. The seeds of unrest had been sown, and the stage was set for yet another dramatic shift in power. With Cambyses gone and the empire in disarray, a new leader would soon rise to steer this ancient juggernaut back on course, or at least try to. More intrigue, more drama, and more lessons in the art of leadership await as we continue this saga of the Persian Empire. Stay tuned for the next episode, where we'll dive into the reign of Darius I, the man who would take the chaos left by Cambyses and forge it into an era of unprecedented prosperity and power. With Cambyses' chaotic reign leaving the Persian Empire on the brink of collapse, in strides Darius I, like a seasoned project manager ready to salvage a startup from the brink of bankruptcy. This isn't just any run-of-the-mill ruler we're talking about. Darius was the guy who took the scattered pieces of a fractured empire and turned them into a well-oiled machine that would make even the most efficient corporate CEO weak at the knees. Darius, a distant cousin of Cambyses, didn't just waltz into power. After Cambyses' untimely self-inflicted demise, Darius had to quash the rebellion led by the so-called Bardia, who was likely an impostor named Gormada, trying to pull a fast one on the empire. In 522 BC, Darius, with a few loyal nobles, orchestrated a coup that would have made the plot of any political thriller look tame. He literally rooted out the pretender and asserted his claim over the empire. Talk about starting a new job with a bang. Once Darius was securely perched on the throne, he didn't waste any time. The Persian Empire was like a massive, unwieldy beast, and Darius had the Herculean task of taming it. His first move, overhauling the empire's administration like a Silicon Valley whiz kid revamping a failing app. He divided the empire into 20 provinces or satrapies, each governed by a satrap. Think of them as regional managers with a flair for local customs and a knack for keeping the peace. It was a brilliant blend of centralized control with local governance, ensuring that the empire's vast territories were more than just a patchwork quilt of rebellious factions waiting to unravel. But Darius didn't stop there. He was the kind of ruler who understood that an empire runs on more than just swords and spears. It runs on coin and communication. Enter the Royal Road, a 677-mile highway stretching from Sardis to Susa, the ancient equivalent of an interstate freeway, minus the traffic jams and rest stops. This wasn't just a road. It was the empire's lifeline, facilitating trade, communication, and yes, the rapid deployment of troops when necessary. Cut down travel time significantly, allowing messages to traverse the empire in mere days instead of months. If you think overnight shipping is impressive, imagine getting a dispatch across half a continent in under a week, all thanks to Darius's logistical genius. Speaking of communication, Darius also established a postal system that would make even the modern mail service blush. This wasn't your typical send a letter and hope it arrives before the next millennium affair. No, Darius's couriers were swift, reliable, and as efficient as a caffeine-fueled delivery service. Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night could stay these ancient couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds. Sound familiar? That's because the U.S. Postal Service borrowed this motto from Herodotus's description of Darius's couriers. Now that's a legacy. Next up on Darius's to-do list was everyone's favorite topic: taxes. Let's face it, taxes aren't exactly a crowd pleaser, but Darius managed to turn this necessary evil into an art form. He standardized tax collection across the empire, ensuring it was fair. Well, as fair as taxes can be. The empire's wealth was funneled into a central treasury, funding everything from infrastructure projects to the military. It was like the IRS, but with more swords and fewer audits. This wasn't just about filling the coffers. It was about building a sustainable system that could support the empire's grand ambitions. Darius's tax system was meticulous, with each satrapy contributing a fixed amount, a concept that might sound familiar to anyone who's ever cringed at their annual tax return. But hey, at least Darius didn't make you file online with a password you'd inevitably forget. The tax revenue funded grand projects like the construction of Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the empire, a sprawling complex of palaces and halls that served as a testament to Persian power and sophistication. But let's not sugarcoat things. Darius's reign wasn't all roads and roses. The empire was a complex beast, and maintaining control required a delicate balance of diplomacy and force. When revolts did spring up, because let's face it, you can't keep everyone happy all the time. Darius didn't shy away from using military might to quash them. His reign saw numerous campaigns to keep the empire's vast territories in line, from the Indus Valley in the east to the fringes of the Aegean in the west. Economically, Darius understood that a thriving empire needed more than just taxes and tribute. He introduced the daric, a gold coin that became the standard currency across the empire. This move was akin to unleashing a new currency that everyone actually wanted to use, not just because it was shiny, but because it facilitated trade like never before. It was a game changer, streamlining commerce across a realm that spanned 3 continents. Coins with Darius's likeness became a symbol of Persian dominance, circulating far beyond the empire's borders and embedding the Persian influence in the very fabric of ancient commerce. Politically, Darius was a maestro of realpolitik, deftly navigating the intricate web of alliances and enmities that defined the ancient world. His court was a melting pot of cultures and ideas, reflecting the diverse tapestry of the empire itself. This wasn't just about showcasing Persian power. It was about fostering an environment where different peoples could coexist under a single banner. Darius's policy of tolerance, much like Cyrus's, allowed for a measure of autonomy among his subjects, ensuring that local customs and traditions were respected, so long as they didn't interfere with the empire's overarching goals. Yet, for all his administrative brilliance, Darius also had to contend with the less glamorous aspects of empire management. The Persian Empire was a sprawling entity, and keeping it stitched together required constant vigilance. It was a bit like trying to keep a giant, unwieldy quilt from unraveling at the seams, only instead of threads. Darius had to deal with rebellious satraps and ambitious generals. He was a master at playing power games, ensuring that no single faction ever became too powerful. As Darius's reign progressed, he continued to expand the empire's borders, but his ambitions also set the stage for future conflicts. His attempts to extend Persian influence into Greece would sow the seeds for the famous Greco-Persian Wars, a saga of epic confrontations that would unfold long after Darius had left the stage. But those are tales for another day. In the end, Darius the Great wasn't just a ruler, he was an architect of empire. His legacy is a testament to the power of vision, administration, and yes, a little bit of ruthless pragmatism. Under his guidance, the Persian Empire flourished, setting standards for governance and infrastructure that would echo through the ages. His reign was a masterclass in turning chaos into order, a lesson in the art of leadership that continues to resonate even today. So, as we wrap up this chapter of Persian history, remember that Darius wasn't just a footnote in the annals of time. He was a force of nature who reshaped the world in his image. His story is one of ambition, innovation, and the relentless pursuit of order in a world teetering on the brink of chaos. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the saga of the Persian Empire and the remarkable figures who steered its course through the tumultuous tides of history. Now, shifting gears from Darius's grand architectural feats, let's dig into how his reign didn't just place Persia on the map, but plastered its name across the ancient world like a billboard visible from space, if they'd had satellites, of course. Under Darius, Persia wasn't just a giant landmass, it was a cultural and economic powerhouse. He turned the empire into a buzzing hub of trade and innovation, with its tendrils stretching from the banks of the Nile to the shores of the Indus. Darius was the kingpin of ancient globalization, a maestro conducting a symphony of trade routes and cultural exchanges. He capitalized on the empire's diversity, encouraging the flow of goods and ideas across its vast expanse. The royal road, a marvel of its time, wasn't just a passage for armies and couriers, but a pipeline for commerce, linking markets and merchants in a web of economic activity that was as intricate as it was lucrative. The empire's satrapies, each a mini-kingdom in itself, contributed to a thriving economy that saw the circulation of goods from silk to spices, metals to manuscripts. This wasn't just an empire. It was an ancient superhighway of wealth and wisdom. But Darius's vision of Persia wasn't solely about amassing riches. The man had a taste for grandeur and a penchant for propaganda that would make even the most seasoned spin doctor nod in approval. Persepolis, with its opulent palaces and towering columns, wasn't just a city, it was a statement. It proclaimed to the world that Persia was here to stay, a cultural beacon that would illuminate the ages. Every relief, every inscription was a carefully crafted piece of imperial storytelling, a narrative of power and permanence etched in stone. Now, let's not get carried away with visions of a utopian empire where everyone held hands and sang Cumbaya under the Persian sun. This was no idyllic dreamland. Running an empire the size of Persia was like trying to herd cats across a football field, exhilarating in theory, chaotic in practice. Beneath the polished veneer of unity lay undercurrents of unrest. The empire was a simmering cauldron of diverse cultures, each with its own identity, customs, and occasionally uprising. Darius's reign, for all its achievements, was punctuated by revolts and rebellions, from the Ionian cities to the Babylonian heartland. This brings us to the elephant, or perhaps the hoplite, in the room, Greece. Darius's attempts to extend Persian hegemony into the Greek city-states set the stage for one of history's most celebrated conflicts, the Greco-Persian Wars. If Darius's reign was a masterclass in empire building, his dealings with Greece were the cliffhanger that left everyone on the edge of their seats. What started as a flicker of defiance in the Ionian revolt soon ignited into a full-blown inferno of resistance, culminating in the legendary battles of Marathon, Thermopylae, and beyond. These were not just skirmishes over territory, they were clashes of civilization, contests of identity that would echo through the corridors of time. The irony here is rich. Darius, the architect of one of history's most enduring empires, also laid the groundwork for its greatest external threat. By tangling with Greece, he inadvertently stoked the fires of a conflict that would long outlast him, saga of struggle and survival that would shape the destiny of East and West alike. It's a reminder that the pursuit of power often sows the seeds of future turmoil, a timeless truth that rings as loud today as it did in the marble halls of Persepolis. As we reach the end of our journey through this chapter of Persian history, what do we make of Darius's legacy? He was a ruler who turned chaos into order, a visionary who saw beyond the horizon of his time. Under his reign, Persia wasn't just a collection of conquered lands. It was a living, breathing entity, a testament to the possibilities and perils of human ambition. Darius's empire was a mosaic of cultures, each piece unique yet part of a larger whole, a testament to the power of unity in diversity. Yet, like all empires, Persia was a paradox, a blend of beauty and brutality, progress and oppression. Darius's story is a tapestry woven with threads of triumph and tragedy, a reminder that history is never black and white, but a spectrum of shades. The Persian Empire, under his stewardship, was a marvel of its age, a beacon of civilization that lit the path for those who followed. The legacies of Cyrus, Cambyses, and Darius are etched into the annals of time, their stories a mix of myth and reality, romance and harsh truth. They were empire builders and dreamers, conquerors and creators, each leaving an indelible mark on the world's stage. Their reigns remind us that power is, as fleeting as it is formidable, a double-edged sword that can both create and destroy, unite and divide. As we close this chapter, let's take a moment to reflect on the nature of legacy. These early empire builders carved out a realm that stretched the limits of human imagination, a testament to what can be achieved when vision meets determination. But they also remind us of the eternal struggle for control, the delicate balance between order and chaos, unity and division. Their stories are a mirror, reflecting the complexities of our own world, a world that continues to be shaped by their enduring influence. So, as you tuck yourself in with these tales of ancient grandeur swirling in your mind, remember that history is the ultimate storyteller, weaving narratives that captivate and caution, inspire and inform. The Persian Empire, in all its glory and grit, is a testament to the heights of human achievement and the depths of human folly. Its legacy, like the empire itself, is vast and varied, a rich tapestry that continues to unravel across the ages. Sleep well, dear listener, for the echoes of the past are never far from the whispers of the future. Your eyes blink open to the symphony of sounds that is Persepolis at the break of dawn. The city is already humming with life as the sun begins its slow crawl up the sky, casting golden hues over an ancient metropolis that's anything but sleepy. You're about to dive headfirst into the fray of the ancient Persian marketplace, circa 500 BCE, where survival isn't just about dodging pickpockets. It's about mastering the art of bartering like your life depends on it. Spoiler alert, it kind of does. Welcome to the bustling heart of Persia, where the marketplace is less a place of casual shopping and more a gladiatorial arena of economic exchange. Forget your neat aisles and price tags. Here, it's all about haggling. And if you thought negotiating your last phone contract was tough, you've got another thing coming. The market is a cacophony of shouting merchants, bleeding livestock and clinking coins, if you're fortunate enough to spot one. It's a sensory overload designed to separate the wheat from the chaff, or in this case, the savvy trader from the hapless tourist. As you wade through the throng, you're immediately hit by a medley of aromas, spices so rich and varied they could make your head spin. Cardamom, cumin, and saffron mingle in the air, each a testament to the vast trade networks that fuel the Persian economy. These aren't just local novelties. They are the result of the empire's sprawling tentacles stretching across continents. Thanks to the Royal Road, an ancient superhighway that spans over 400 kilometers from Susa to Sardis, goods and ideas flow with remarkable efficiency. It's the 5th century BCE equivalent of the Silk Road, only without the need for frequent flyer miles. Now, let's talk economics, because you're not just here to nose around. You need to score some essentials. The bartering system here is an art form that makes today's stock market seem like a relaxing game of checkers. There's no standard currency. Coins are rare and mostly used by the ruling elite, so you're trading goods for goods, services for services. The concept of a fixed price, a laughable fantasy. Picture yourself trying to swap a bolt of fine textiles for a bag of grain. It sounds simple, but the nuances are mind-boggling. You have to consider the quality, the demand, and the ever-shifting political winds that could make or break a deal. Here's a twist. The Persian marketplace is more than just a shopping expedition. It's a microcosm of the empire's political labyrinth. While you're busy securing that sack of nuts, you might overhear whispers of a new decree from King Darius I, the big boss ruling over this vast empire. His policies ripple through the market like shockwaves, affecting prices and availability of goods on a whim. One moment, incense is the hot commodity because of a royal ritual. The next, it's yesterday's news thanks to a sudden military campaign requiring all hands and all resources on deck. And while we're on the subject of royal influence, let's talk about the Royal Road. This isn't just some dusty trail through the desert. Constructed under Darius's watchful eye, it connects key cities and facilitates trade like nobody's business. Postal stations dart the route, allowing messages to zip back and forth like ancient emails. Herodotus, that ancient gossip columnist, claimed that royal couriers could cover the entire distance in just 9 days. Not bad for an era where horsepower referred to actual horses. But back to the market, where you're still trying to figure out if you're being swindled by a merchant with a grin as wide as the Tigris. This is where myth meets reality. Romanticize it all you want, the vibrant bazaar, the colorful characters. But the truth is, it's a cutthroat world where one wrong move could see you overpaying in spectacular fashion. Every purchase is a dance, a delicate balance of charm, persuasion, and a poker face that could rival Darius himself. By now, you're probably realizing why you might not last a day here. It's not just the unrelenting pace or the constant mental gymnastics. It's the sheer unpredictability of it all. One minute you're negotiating the price of figs, the next you're ducking out of the way as a herd of goats makes an unscheduled appearance, herded by a shepherd who's got more on his mind than traffic control. And then there's the crowd, a melting pot of cultures and languages, reflecting the empire's vast reach. You might bump into traders from India, Babylon, or even Greece, all looking to make a deal. Each brings their own flair to the marketplace, adding layers of complexity to an already intricate tapestry of human interaction. That scarf you're eyeing, it could have threads woven in far-off lands, each telling a story of its own. So, as you navigate this whirlwind of commerce and culture, remember that every transaction is more than just a trade of goods. It's a glimpse into the colossal machine that is the Persian Empire. An empire where trade routes are the arteries, and markets like this one are the beating heart. You're not just shopping, you're part of a grand economic ballet that keeps one of history's greatest civilizations on its toes. And there you have it, the morning rush of Persepolis, where the past doesn't just whisper, it shouts. As your day in ancient Persia's marketplace unfolds, keep your wits about you. There's more to come, and the sun isn't even at its zenith. Buckle up, because this is just the beginning. As you edge deeper into the market's labyrinthine lanes, let's take a moment to have a not-so-brief chat about currency, specifically the absence of it. Forget that jangly collection of coins in your pocket, or that sleek plastic card you swipe at will. Here, we're diving headfirst into the world of standardized weights and measures. Welcome to an economic system where you barter, haggle, and possibly pull your hair out over the value of silver bars. Silver bars, you ask? Absolutely. Coins are a luxury item, largely confined to the pockets of the elite. The rest of us are left to wrestle with chunks of precious metal, weighed out with almost surgical precision. The bars are stamped with the royal seal, a not-so-subtle reminder that even in trade, the Persian kings have their fingers in the pie. If you want to talk numbers, let's get specific. A standard silver bar weighs about 4 grams, and it's your ticket to a bag of grain or a bolt of fabric, depending on the day's going rate. Because, of course, prices in this pre-coinage world are as stable as a 3-legged chair. Now, why does this system exist, and who's pulling these economic strings? Enter Darius the Great, the mastermind behind this elaborate marketplace ballet. He didn't just wake up one day and decide to play Monopoly with real lives. No, Darius understood that a standardized system of weights and measures was critical to maintaining control over his sprawling empire, an empire so vast it makes the British Empire look like a backyard sandbox. In Darius's time, around 522 BCE, this was revolutionary stuff. He wasn't just a king, he was a CEO of the ancient world, ensuring that trade flowed smoothly along the royal road. This road wasn't just a means to transport goods, it was a lifeline for his power, a way to keep tabs on every merchant, every deal, and every whisper of rebellion. Think of it as the original information superhighway, albeit one where information traveled at a gallop rather than a gigabyte. But here's the kicker. Standardizing weights and measures wasn't just about economics. It was a political statement. Darius knew that by imposing a system that everyone had to follow, he was knitting the empire together with threads of silver. His bar system wasn't just currency, it was a symbol of unity, a way of saying, we're all in this empire business together. Now, before you start romanticizing this silver-laden utopia, let's debunk a few myths. This wasn't a world of fair trades and gentlemanly exchanges. No, it was more like a game of chess where the stakes could be your next meal. Merchants had a reputation for being as slippery as a well-oiled eel, always ready to pounce on inexperience and exploit the uninitiated. The phrase buyer beware was probably coined right here, albeit in old Persian. And let's not forget the weights themselves. Standards were all well and good in theory, but in practice, well, let's just say those scales might have been a tad rigged. Merchants would tweak them to their advantage, making sure their silver weighed just a smidgen more, or your goods weighed just a smidgen less. And who was going to argue? The royal road might bring news in a flash, but justice moved at a camel's pace. Now, the marketplace is more than just an economic hub. It's a cultural melting pot. Stand still for a moment, and you'll hear a dozen languages, each trader shouting in their native tongue, their voices merging into an incomprehensible symphony. Greek, Aramaic, Babylonian, all converging in a linguistic free-for-all. This is the empire's diversity on full display. You might spot a Phoenician peddling purple dye, or an Egyptian trying to offload some papyrus, each one vying for your attention with the persistence of a modern-day telemarketer. But why does any of this matter, you ask? Because the Persian marketplace wasn't just about trading goods, it was about trading ideas. The moment you traded a bolt of silk for a jar of olive oil, you were participating in a cultural exchange that transcended borders. Innovations, philosophies, even recipes, they all flowed through this marketplace like trade winds, carrying the seeds of future empires and civilizations. And all of this hustle and bustle was underpinned by the silent, watchful eye of the Achaemenid administration. Darius wasn't just a figurehead, he was the architect of this grand societal experiment. His policies, like the introduction of the Daric, a gold coin named after himself, naturally, were calculated moves to solidify his legacy. The Daric was all about convenience, a way to grease the wheels of commerce and keep the empire ticking like a well-oiled machine. But here's the irony. In a marketplace that thrived on chaos and unpredictability, the Daric was a beacon of stability. It symbolized the empire's might and the king's vision, a vision that sought to unite a diverse population under one economic banner. And though the Daric would eventually become the gold standard, pun intended, in the ancient world, here in this bustling market, it's just one more piece in a complex economic puzzle. So, as you navigate the stalls, dodging the enthusiastic vendors and their dubious scales, remember that you're not just a sharper. You're a player in a grand historical narrative. Every silver bar you trade, every deal you strike, is a testament to the empire's ingenuity and its imperfections. In this ancient Persian bazaar, the past isn't just a backdrop. It's the main event, with you as the unwitting and possibly unwilling protagonist. As the sun climbs higher, casting long shadows over the bustling lanes, you realize that this marketplace is more than just a place of commerce. It's a living, breathing testament to human ingenuity and ambition, a microcosm of an empire that, despite its flaws, thrived on diversity and innovation. And while you might not last a day here without a little help, there's no denying the allure of this chaotic tapestry of trade and culture. So keep your wits about you, because in this world, every transaction is a story waiting to unfold. As the sun reaches its zenith, casting a golden glow over the bustling marketplace of Persepolis, you start noticing the players in this high-stakes game of commerce. It's a bit like watching a historical soap opera unfold, only with fewer scandalous secrets and more shouting. Here, the social strata are on full display. Wealthy merchants flaunt their wares with the confidence of peacocks, while humble artisans quietly craft their goods, hoping for a customer with an eye for quality over quantity. Let's start at the top of this economic food chain. The wealthy merchants are the rock stars of this ancient bazaar, lords of their own little empires. Picture them in their embroidered robes, dripping with enough gold and jewels to make a pharaoh blush. They're the ones who can afford to play the long game, hoarding goods when prices are low and selling when demand skyrockets. Kind of like ancient Wall Street brokers. If Wall Street had camels instead of ticker tape. These merchants often hail from diverse backgrounds. You've got Greeks, Egyptians, and Babylonians all elbowing for dominance. Each brings their own flair to the marketplace. Greek traders, for instance, are known for their olive oil and wine, commodities that are as cherished as they are scarce in this arid land. Meanwhile, the Egyptians are the masters of papyrus and linen, their goods coveted by those who can afford such luxuries. Babylonians, on the other hand, bring a touch of mystique with their exotic perfumes and spices, transforming the air into a fragrant tapestry of distant lands. But it's not all glitz and glamour. These merchants operate under the watchful eye of the Persian administration, which is as tolerant as it is controlling. Why the paradox? Because the empire's strength lies in its diversity, yet unity must be maintained at all costs. It's a delicate dance that makes the marketplace a microcosm of the Persian imperial ethos. Darius, ever the strategist, knew that allowing these ethnic enclaves to thrive under his rule would bolster the economy and strengthen his grip on power. So, while the Greeks and Egyptians might compete fiercely, they coexist under a banner of enforced harmony. Now, let's shift gears and talk about the artisans, the unsung heroes of this economic saga. Their role is as crucial as it is challenging. These folks are the backbone of the marketplace, crafting everything from pottery to textiles with skills passed down through generations. They're like the indie artists of the ancient world, creating unique pieces that stand out in a sea of mass-produced goods. But there's a catch. While artisans are revered for their craft, they often find themselves at the mercy of wealthier patrons. It's a classic tale of talent versus capital, where the artisan's survival hinges on the whims of those with deeper pockets. If they're lucky, a well-heeled merchant might take a shine to their work, offering patronage in exchange for exclusivity. If not, they might end up trading their finest wares for essentials like grain or olive oil, just to get by. And don't even get me started on the social hierarchies that dictate interactions here. It's like a living game of chess, where everyone knows their place, and the wrong move could mean social checkmate. For instance, a Greek merchant might hold sway over a transaction, but a Babylonian scribe could have the last word if the deal involves complex contracts or record-keeping. It's a balancing act of power, skill, and ethnicity, where alliances shift like sand dunes. Yet, in this multicultural melee, there's more than just commerce at play. The marketplace is a crucible of cultural exchange, where ideas ricochet between traders like a philosophical game of ping-pong. You're as likely to hear a heated debate about the latest innovations in irrigation as you are about the merits of a particular spice blend. It's a testament to human curiosity, proving that even in the midst of a buying frenzy, people can't resist a good intellectual sparring match. But let's not romanticize it too much. Beneath the surface of this vibrant cultural tapestry lies a simmering tension. With so many ethnicities vying for prominence, conflicts are inevitable. Disputes over trade routes or pricing can quickly escalate into full-blown rivalries. And while the Persian administration is quick to step in and restore order, the underlying friction remains, a constant reminder that peace is as fragile as the pottery on display. So, as you wander through this bustling bazaar, remember that every interaction is a reflection of the broader imperial ethos. In this world, tolerance isn't just a virtue, it's a necessity for survival. Yet control remains the watchword, as the empire seeks to harness the chaos of diversity into a cohesive whole. It's a balancing act worthy of the finest acrobat, a testament to the ingenuity and ambition of one of history's greatest empires. As the afternoon sun casts long shadows over the marketplace, you begin to appreciate the intricate dance of commerce and culture that defines this ancient world. Every deal struck, every whispered negotiation, is a thread in the rich tapestry of Persian society. And while you might not last a day in this whirlwind of trade, there's no denying the allure of a world where every transaction tells a story, and every story is a glimpse into the heart of a civilization that thrived on the edge of chaos. As the sun dips and shadows stretch like lazy cats across the bustling lanes of Persepolis, it's time to dive headfirst into the sensory overload that is the ancient Persian marketplace. Brace yourself, because this isn't your average stroll through a farmer's market. It's more like a sensory roller coaster where your senses are the passengers and there's no safety harness in sight. First, let's talk about the noise. Forget the gentle hum of a modern mall. This place is an all-out symphony of sound. The air is thick with the shouts of merchants hawking their goods, each trying to out-yell the next. It's like a vocal arms race, where the loudest voice wins. You've got sellers of spices, textiles, and the odd camel dealer all contributing to this cacophony. Their cries mingle with the bleating of goats and the occasional bray of a donkey, creating a chaotic soundtrack that could rival a rock concert, if rock concerts had been invented yet. Now, if you thought the noise was intense, wait until you hit the olfactory wall of sense. The air is a heady mix of spices like cardamom, cumin, and saffron, mingling with the more, shall we say, natural aromas of livestock. It's the ancient world's version of an air freshener, just with a bit more grit. And let's not forget the smell of roasting meat from food stalls, a reminder that even in 500 BCE, street food was an essential part of the human experience. You're as likely to find yourself drooling over a lamb kebab as you are pinching your nose at the smell of unwashed humanity wrestling for the best bargain. But it's not just about sound and scent. Oh no. Your eyes are in for a treat too. The marketplace is a kaleidoscope of colors, a visual feast that makes even the most drab day feel like a festival. Luxurious fabrics from China ripple in the breeze, their vibrant hues rivaling the peacock-like merchants themselves. Silks in deep purples, rich reds, and luminous golds catch the light, each bolt a testament to the far-reaching tentacles of Persian trade. And let's not forget the pottery, each piece an artwork, painted with intricate designs that tell stories of gods, heroes, and the occasional daily life scene. Speaking of exotic goods, let's take a moment to marvel at the range of items that captured the imaginations of ancient shoppers. Picture this, an elephant from India, standing majestically in the market square. It's not just a beast of burden, it's a status symbol, a living testament to the empire's wealth and reach. Not exactly your typical market find, right? But in a place where luxury is a statement, an elephant is the ultimate flex. And while we're on the subject of exotic goods, let's not forget the spices and textiles that made their way along the royal road. These weren't just commodities, they were the lifeblood of the empire. Imagine, if you will, a trader from China, his caravan laden with silk. This isn't just fabric, it's the height of luxury, commanding prices that could make a merchant's year. And those spices, they're not just for flavoring food, they're currency in their own right, traded like gold and cherished for their rarity. But let's hit pause on this romanticized vision and dig a little deeper. Thanks to our friends, the Greek historians, we have a view of these markets that might not be entirely accurate. They painted the Persian marketplace with broad, Orientalist brushstrokes, romanticizing it as an exotic, almost mythical place. In reality, it was more gritty than glamorous, a place where the harsh realities of trade were as present as the goods themselves. You see, Greek historians like Herodotus often viewed the Persian Empire through a lens of awe and otherness. To them, Persia was the epitome of the exotic East, a world of opulence and mystery. While it's true that the empire was wealthy and diverse, the day-to-day grind of the marketplace was less about luxury and more about survival. Merchants weren't just trading goods, they were navigating a complex web of politics, economics, and cultural exchanges, often while trying to avoid being swindled themselves. And let's be real, those Greek accounts were laced with a healthy dose of bias. Greeks and Persians weren't exactly best friends. They were rivals, locked in a dance of power and influence. So, when Greek writers depicted the Persian markets, they often did so with a hint of condescension, emphasizing the exotic at the expense of the ordinary. But beneath the surface of this storied market lay the gritty realities of ancient trade, dirty deals, sharp bargaining, and the ever-present threat of economic ruin. So, as you navigate the market's labyrinthine lanes, dodging the occasional runaway goat and the persistent glare of a suspicious merchant, remember that this isn't just a place of commerce. It's a living, breathing entity, one where every transaction is as much about survival as it is about profit. It's a world where the past isn't just a story. It's a vibrant, chaotic reality with you as an unwitting participant. As the afternoon wears on and the sun begins its slow descent, casting everything in a golden light, you start to feel the weight of history. This marketplace isn't just a relic of the past. It's a testament to human ingenuity and ambition. And while you might not last a day here without a little help, there's no denying the allure of this chaotic tapestry of trade and culture. So keep your wits about you, because in this world, every transaction is a story waiting to unfold, and every story is a glimpse into the heart of a civilization that thrived on the edge of chaos. But don't get too comfortable, because there's more to this story. As the shadows lengthen and the day's business winds down, the market doesn't simply close, it transforms. Traders pack up their goods, securing them against the night, while storytellers take center stage, spinning tales that blur the line between myth and reality. It's a reminder that in ancient Persia, as in life, the line between commerce and culture is a thin one, and the marketplace is where they collide in the most spectacular fashion. Stay tuned for what's to come, because the story of the Persian marketplace is far from over. In this world of haggling and hustle, there's always another deal to be made, another tale to be told. So buckle up, we're just getting started. As the sun dips below the horizon, transforming Persepolis into a silhouette against the evening sky, the marketplace undergoes its own metamorphosis. With the day's business wrapped up, the air shifts from the frenetic energy of trade to the more relaxed hum of camaraderie. Traders pack away their goods, securing them as tightly as their hard-earned profits. But don't be fooled into thinking the market simply shuts down. No, now it's time for the real magic to begin, the kind that can't be weighed or measured. The marketplace was never just about goods. It was about ideas, the kind that could change the course of an empire. Picture this: a Greek philosopher, a Babylonian astronomer, and an Egyptian scribe walk into a bar, or rather, gather around a fire. What do they discuss? Not just the day's profits, but the stars above, the mysteries of the Nile, and the philosophies that bind their disparate worlds together. This is where the Achaemenid Empire truly shines, not just as a political powerhouse, but as a crucible of cultural exchange. Now, let's zoom out a bit. The interconnectedness of this marketplace was a microcosm of the entire empire. The Achaemenids, under the astute leadership of Darius I and his successors, were masters of integration. They knew that to maintain control over such a vast territory, spanning from the Indus Valley in the east to Thrace and Macedonia on the European front, they needed more than just military might. They needed administrative brilliance, the kind that could weave a tapestry of cultures into a single, cohesive unit. The Royal Road, that ancient superhighway of commerce and communication, was as much a tool of diplomacy as it was of trade. Stretching over 400 kilometers, it was the lifeblood of the empire, ensuring that not only goods, but also ideas and policies could flow freely. This wasn't just about moving silk and spices. It was about fostering a sense of unity among the empire's diverse subjects. It's like the ancient world's version of a group chat, only with more camels and fewer emojis. And here's the kicker. The marketplace, with its cacophony of voices and clash of cultures, was a testament to the empire's sophistication. It wasn't just a place to buy and sell. It was a stage where the empire's administrative genius was on full display. Tax collectors, market inspectors, and scribes each played a role in maintaining order, ensuring that the gears of commerce turned smoothly. It was bureaucracy at its finest, a well-oiled machine that kept the empire running like clockwork, even if that clock sometimes ran on Persian time. But let's not gloss over the gritty realities. The marketplace, for all its vibrancy, was also a place of sharp elbows and sharper tongues. Bargaining was an art form, a test of wits where the stakes could be as high as your next meal. This wasn't just a quaint tradition, it was a survival skill. And while the empire's policies might have provided a framework for trade, the actual act of buying and selling was left to the whims of human nature, complete with all its flaws and foibles. Now, let's debunk a romantic myth, the idea that ancient economies were isolated, self-sufficient entities. The Persian marketplace serves as a powerful counterpoint to this notion. It was a hub of global trade, a place where the goods of Asia, Africa, and Europe converged. From the spices of India to the gold of Lydia, the market was a melting pot of products and people, each transaction a thread in the web of ancient commerce. This wasn't isolation. It was globalization in its earliest form, a reminder that humans have always been connected, long before the internet shrank the world into a digital village. And here's where it gets really interesting. The principles that underpinned this ancient marketplace still resonate today. The concepts of trade networks, cultural exchange, and administrative efficiency are as relevant now as they were then. The Persian Empire, with its emphasis on connectivity and integration, laid the groundwork for the global economies we see today. It's a legacy that echoes through the ages, reminding us that while empires may rise and fall, the drive to connect and trade endures. So, as you reflect on your whirlwind day in the Persian marketplace, take a moment to appreciate the broader implications. This wasn't just a place of commerce. It was a cornerstone of an empire, a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability. And while you might not have lasted a day in its frenetic embrace, there's no denying the profound impact it had on shaping the world as we know it. As the fires die down and the last echoes of laughter fade into the night, the marketplace stands as a silent witness to history's grand narrative. It tells a story of ambition and innovation, of cultures colliding and coalescing into something greater than the sum of their parts. And in that story, perhaps we find a reflection of our own world, a reminder that the threads of the past are woven into the fabric of our present, connecting us in ways both seen and unseen. So, as you drift off to sleep, let your dreams wander back to those bustling lanes, where the past wasn't just a backdrop, but a living, breathing reality. In the Persian marketplace, every transaction was a story, and every story a testament to the enduring power of trade and human connection. And who knows, maybe tomorrow's world-changing idea is waiting in the next market stall, just a haggle away. In the swirling mists of early feudal Japan, the samurai warrior class emerged not from the pages of poetry or the strokes of a brush, but from the chaotic scrap heap of necessity. Picture this: the Heian period, spanning from 794 to 1185, a time when Japan was as politically stable as a house of cards in a hurricane. The imperial court, nestled in the opulent city of Heian-Kaiyo, modern-day Kyoto, was too busy perfecting the art of calligraphy and composing waka poetry to notice that its grip on the provinces was slipping faster than a greased eel. This is where our legendary, armor-clad friends come into play. The samurai didn't just pop out of nowhere, fully formed like Athena from Zeus's forehead. They evolved from the ranks of armed retainers and provincial warriors, their rise fueled by the need for local lords, or daimyo, to protect their lands from bandits, rival clans, and the occasional rebellious peasant who fancied his chances. The imperial court's inability to maintain order across the archipelago meant that power gradually decentralized, like a poorly run franchise. Now, let's get one thing straight. The romanticized image of the samurai as noble, cherry-blossom-loving warriors is about as accurate as a samurai sword made of tofu. Sure, they had a code of honor, known as Bushido, but this wasn't some ancient, unyielding creed etched in stone. It was more like a flexible guideline, subject to the whims of whoever was wielding the katana at the time. And speaking of katanas, these bad boys cost a small fortune. A well-crafted blade could set you back a cool 20 gold coins, roughly the equivalent of a year's salary for a common farmer. But hey, when you're slicing through your enemies with a blade that sharp, who's counting? The gritty reality of samurai life was less about Zen gardens and more about survival in a cutthroat world. Battles were messy, brutal affairs, and the samurai were as much about pragmatism as they were about poetry. Their armor, for example, was a marvel of engineering. The oyoroi, or great armor, was a complex assembly of metal plates and leather, weighing in at around 30 kilograms. Imagine trying to sprint across a muddy battlefield while wearing a small car, and you get the picture. This wasn't cheap, either. Producing such armor required skilled craftsmen and a hefty investment, often necessitating land grants known as shun to keep these warriors in business. These shun were the economic lifeblood of the samurai class. Essentially, they were tax-free estates granted by the court to monasteries, aristocrats, and warriors as a way to buy loyalty and military service. It was a win-win, well, unless you were a commoner paying taxes to maintain these estates while watching the samurai ride around like rock stars on horseback. The shun system was a clever solution to a costly problem. The court got its protection, the samurai got their land, and the economy limped along like an overworked ox. But why did this all matter? The rise of the samurai wasn't just a chapter in a history book. It was the start of a seismic shift in Japanese society. As these warriors gained power, they began to challenge the aristocracy, setting the stage for centuries of political intrigue, warfare, and ultimately, the shogunate, a military dictatorship that would rule Japan in one form or another until the Meiji Restoration in 1868. So, while the samurai may have started as mere hired muscle, they evolved into much more. The very embodiment of the complex interplay between power, loyalty, and survival in a rapidly changing world. And as we continue to unravel their story, we'll see how these warriors navigated the treacherous waters of feudal Japan, sometimes with honor, sometimes with cunning, but always with an eye on the prize. Stay tuned, because the tale of the samurai is just getting started, and it's a ride you won't want to miss. So, the samurai story is just warming up, and today we're diving headfirst into the gritty, sweat-drenched world of samurai training. Buckle up, because this isn't your run-of-the-mill martial arts class. We're talking about a rigorous, no-nonsense regimen designed to turn mere mortals into warriors capable of surviving the chaotic melee of feudal battles. First up, the martial skills. If you thought swinging a katana was all there was to being a samurai, think again. Sure, they had to master the art of the sword, but that was just the tip of the proverbial iceberg. The samurai trained in a range of weapons like the yumi, longbow, yari spear, and naginata, a sort of polearm that looks like a sword on a stick, because why not? This wasn't just versatility for versatility's sake. It was a practical necessity. When your life depends on it, you'd want to be as dangerous as possible with whatever weapon came to hand, including your own two fists. Now, let's talk about the physical regimen. Training wasn't just about honing skills. It was about building the endurance to fight in a 30-kilogram suit of armor. Picture yourself doing the samurai equivalent of CrossFit, but instead of battling a timer, you're up against a sword-wielding opponent. The armor, known as o-yori, was like wearing a steel and leather sauna, designed to protect, but also to test the limits of one's stamina. Fun fact, some samurai even practiced misogi, rituals involving cold water purification, which they believed toughened the body and spirit. Think of it as the original ice bucket challenge, but with more existential dread. Psychological toughness was another key ingredient in the samurai recipe. The battles weren't just about physical prowess. They were mental games of chess, with life-or-death stakes. Samurai were trained to maintain calm under pressure, to make split-second decisions, and to deal with the ever-present specter of death. This mental fortitude was often tied to Zen Buddhism, which promoted a focus on the present moment and an acceptance of life's fleeting nature. It was a mindset that allowed warriors to face down opponents, not with the reckless bravado of an action hero, but with the steely resolve of someone who's accepted their mortality. Now, let's shatter some illusions, because who doesn't love a good myth-busting session? The romantic image of the samurai as invincible warriors capable of superhuman feats is about as accurate as a Hollywood blockbuster's take on historical events. These were highly skilled fighters, no doubt, but they weren't superheroes. They bled, they tired, and sometimes they even lost. The battles were chaotic, and the outcomes often depended as much on strategy and numbers as on individual skill. A lone samurai taking on an entire army, that's more popcorn fantasy than historical fact. Speaking of strategy, let's not forget the logistics of supplying a samurai. Maintaining these warriors was no small feat. Samurai needed weapons, armor, and horses, not to mention the food and provisions to keep them battle-ready. This was a massive logistical operation, often coordinated by the warrior's daimyo, or feudal lord. Supplies had to be transported across rugged terrain, and given the unpredictable nature of warfare, contingency plans were essential. It's like running a medieval Amazon, but with more swords and fewer delivery trucks. Economically, keeping a samurai in the field was a costly venture. The aforementioned Shun system helped bankroll their activities, but it was a delicate balance. The daimyo needed to ensure that their warriors were well equipped, which meant investing heavily in their training and maintenance. This system of land grants in exchange for military service was a cornerstone of the samurai economy, keeping the wheels of war well greased, so to speak. In the big picture, all this training and preparation wasn't just about surviving battles. It was about maintaining a way of life. To the samurai, war was more than a profession. It was a calling. This wasn't just about personal glory or victory. It was about upholding one's duty to their lord, and by extension, to the social order. The samurai's life was a high-stakes balancing act, a dance between power and loyalty, survival and sacrifice. As we peel back the layers of the samurai's world, it's clear that their path was one of relentless discipline and unwavering focus. Yet, despite the harsh realities. Legend of the samurai continues to captivate our imaginations. Maybe it's the allure of a life lived with purpose, or perhaps it's the thrill of walking the razor's edge between life and death. Whatever the reason, the story of the samurai is far from over, and there's plenty more to uncover. So stay tuned, because we're just getting started, and trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Now, as the samurai saga unravels further, let's step onto the battlefield, where the real action unfolds. You see, samurai warfare wasn't just an elaborate game of dress-up with fancy swords. It was a complex dance of strategy, politics, and occasionally sheer dumb luck. Forget the Hollywood image of single combat. Real samurai battles were more like high-stakes chess games with a side of chaos. First, let's talk about formations. Samurai didn't just charge willy-nilly into battle, waving their swords like they were auditioning for a martial arts flick. No, they had structured battle formations, designed to maximize their strengths and minimize their weaknesses. One popular formation was the hoshi, or arrowhead, which, as you might have guessed, looked like an arrowhead. This pointed formation allowed samurai to break through enemy lines like a hot knife through tofu. Then there was the kakyoku, or crane wing, which spread out wide to envelop the enemy. Think of it as the military version of a group hug, only with more sharp objects involved. Now, these formations weren't just about aesthetics. They were deeply influenced by the societal structures of the time. Enter the daimyo, the feudal lords who were the puppet masters behind these military shows. The daimyo were the power brokers, the ones who gathered samurai armies like some folks collect stamps. They were the ones who decided who fought whom, where, and why, and they weren't above using a little deceit to tip the scales in their favor. Alliances were as fickle as a cat's affection, with betrayals as common as rice in a Japanese kitchen. Speaking of deceit, samurai warfare was as much about backroom deals as it was about battlefield heroics. A well-placed alliance could make or break a campaign. More than a few battles were decided, not by the clashing of swords, but by the clinking of sake cups, as samurai and daimyo toasted to their latest pact, or plotted the next betrayal. Remember the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. The outcome hinged not just on martial prowess, but on which daimyo could flip the most allies to his side. When it comes to warfare, shrewd politics often trump brute strength, but let's not forget the tools of the trade. The samurai arsenal was as diverse as it was deadly. Take the yumi, for instance, a longbow that could shoot arrows over 100 meters. This wasn't just any bow, it was a technological marvel of its time. The yumi's asymmetrical design allowed samurai to shoot from horseback, a skill that came in handy when you needed to rain arrows on your enemies while galloping at full tilt. And let's not overlook the advent of firearms. By the 16th century, the Portuguese had introduced the matchlock arquebus to Japan, forever altering the landscape of samurai warfare. Suddenly, a well-placed shot could take down even the mightiest samurai, adding a new layer of unpredictability to the battlefield. Of course, with guns came gunpowder, and with gunpowder came the delightful risk of blowing oneself to smithereens. Handling these early firearms required nerves of steel and a healthy respect for explosive substances. The introduction of firearms didn't mean the end of the samurai sword, though. Instead, it added another tool to their arsenal, making them even more formidable and more expensive to maintain. It was like upgrading from a flip phone to a smartphone. Suddenly, you needed a whole new set of skills and accessories to stay in the game. Now, let's sprinkle in some gallows humor, because what's a conversation about warfare without a bit of dark amusement? Imagine trudging through mud and blood, weighed down by armor and weapons, only to find that your mighty katana is about as useful as a toothpick against a distant rifle. Or consider the joy of marching for days, only to be betrayed by an ally who decided those new rice fields were worth more than your friendship. Survival in this brutal world often hinged on the whims of fate as much as on a warrior's skill. A samurai might spend years honing his martial abilities, only to have his life cut short by a stray bullet or a sudden betrayal. It was a stark reminder that the romance of the samurai was often overshadowed by the harsh reality of their existence. And why did all this matter? Well, these strategies and societal structures weren't just about winning battles. They were about maintaining order in a world that teetered on the brink of chaos. The samurai were more than warriors. They were the glue that held feudal Japan together, for better or worse. Their battles, alliances, and betrayals shaped the course of Japanese history, leaving a legacy as enduring as it is complex. As we continue this journey through the world of the samurai, remember that behind every legend is a tapestry of raw human ambition, cunning, and survival. The tale of the samurai is far from over, and the next chapter promises even more intrigue and adventure. So stick around, because we're just getting started, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's next in this epic saga. But while the battlefield offered its own brand of chaos and camaraderie, life off the field was no less intricate for our samurai. You see, when they weren't slicing and dicing their way through enemy lines, these warriors were tangled in the web of everyday responsibilities and societal expectations. And trust me, that web was as sticky as it was complicated. Let's start with the role of the samurai as landowners. Picture this: the samurai, once fearsome warriors, now trading in their swords for spreadsheets. Okay, maybe not spreadsheets, but managing a Shun estate was no easy task. These estates, the bread and butter of samurai wealth, required constant oversight. We're talking about agricultural management, dealing with tenant farmers, and ensuring that the land remained productive. Think of it as running a farm and a small village all at once, with the added pressure of maintaining your status in the feudal hierarchy. No pressure at all, right? And while we're on the topic of status, let's talk family life. The samurai were family men, but not necessarily in the way you might expect. Marriage was often more about strategic alliances than romantic dinners under the cherry blossoms. A well-placed marriage could strengthen ties between powerful families or secure a samurai's position in the social pecking order. Love might have been in the air, but more often than not, it was mingling with the scent of political maneuvering and economic considerations. Yet, even the most hardened warriors weren't immune to the softer side of life. Samurai were expected to be cultured individuals, patrons of the arts. This wasn't just a hobby, it was a duty. Supporting the arts, whether it was poetry, calligraphy, or the tea ceremony, was a way to demonstrate sophistication and reinforce social standing. You might say they were the original Renaissance men, long before the Medici started their art-collecting spree in Florence. Now, let's peel back the layers of the famed code of Bushido, that mystical set of samurai ethics often romanticized as the embodiment of honor and loyalty. In reality, Bushido was more of a nebulous concept, evolving over time like a samurai's taste in armor. It wasn't a fixed code, but a loose collection of ideals. Concepts like gi, rectitude, yu, courage, and jin, benevolence, were lauded, but how they were applied often depended on the situation and the samurai himself. It's a bit like having a rule book where the rules are more guidelines, and everyone has their own interpretation. Here's where things get interesting. The idealized image of the samurai as paragons of virtue often butted heads with the messy business of real life. For instance, seppuku, or ritual suicide, was held up as the ultimate act of loyalty and honor. But the truth, it was sometimes coerced, a way for samurai to save face when they'd fallen out of favor. A noble death, perhaps, but also a grim reminder that honor had its dark side. As warfare ebbed and flowed, so too did the economic fortunes of the samurai. During peacetime, these warriors had to pivot, adapting to roles that kept them busy and relevant. Some took on bureaucratic duties, others became educators, imparting martial skills and philosophical wisdom to the next generation. But here's the kicker. The transition wasn't always smooth. Imagine a battle-hardened samurai now tasked with managing tax records. Not exactly the stuff of legends, but a necessary evolution to maintain status and livelihood. Economic pressures were no joke. The cost of maintaining samurai status without the constant influx of wartime rewards meant that many were teetering on financial instability. Without the spoils of war, they relied heavily on their Shun estates, but as these were subject to political whims and natural calamities, the financial footing was often shaky. It's like riding a bicycle on a tightrope. Impressive if you can pull it off, but nerve-wracking all the same. And here's a fun twist. By the Edo period, the Tokugawa shogunate had ushered in an era of relative peace, but this peace was a double-edged sword for the samurai. With less warfare, their martial skills became more ceremonial than practical. Many samurai found themselves attending an endless parade of social functions, where the real battles were fought with wit and diplomacy, not swords. So, why does any of this matter? The samurai's adaptation to peacetime roles wasn't just about survival. It was about redefining their place in a changing world. They were caught between their storied past and an uncertain future, balancing the romantic ideals of Bushido with the gritty reality of economic necessity. This duality, this constant evolution, is what makes their story so compelling. In the end, the samurai were more than warriors. They were human beings navigating the complexities of life in feudal Japan. Their tales are rich with contradictions, revealing a world where honor and pragmatism danced a delicate waltz. As we continue to unravel their story, it becomes clear that the samurai were not just historical figures, but reflections of the universal human condition, a testament to resilience, adaptability, and the eternal struggle to find meaning in an ever-changing world. And with that, we find ourselves at the precipice of yet another chapter in this ongoing saga. As we delve deeper into the lives of these fascinating figures, we'll explore how they navigated the turbulent waters of history, sometimes with grace, sometimes with grit, but always with an eye on the horizon. So stay with me, because the story of the samurai is far from over, and there's still so much more to uncover in this epic journey through time. And so, as the samurai journey weaves through the tapestry of time, we find ourselves at the dawn of the Edo period, a time when the land was as serene as a Zen garden, on the surface at least. The Tokugawa shogunate had brought about an era of peace, which, for the samurai, is a bit like a rock band discovering their genre, is no longer in vogue. The swords stayed sharp, but their primary function shifted from slicing enemies to slicing the air in meticulously choreographed displays during peacetime exercises. Now, let's get real about this so-called peace. While the samurai were no longer needed for constant warfare, they weren't exactly sitting idle. Instead, they were redefined, reshaped like clay in the hands of societal change. Imagine you're a samurai, accustomed to the roar of battle, now tasked with bureaucratic duties. The katana, once a tool of war, is now more akin to a ceremonial paperweight. It's a bit like asking a lion to guard a sheep, effective, but not exactly fulfilling. As the Edo period stretched over 2.5 centuries, the samurai became more like feudal managers, overseeing agricultural production and local governance. They were still a cut above the rest, but their swords were more symbolic than practical. The economic structure that supported them also saw a shift. The stipends they received from their daimyo were akin to a salary but were often paid in rice. Yes, rice, the currency of choice, because nothing says economic stability like getting paid in carbs. Yet even as rice flowed, so did the financial woes. Inflation reared its ugly head, and many samurai found their once noble status slipping through their fingers like sand. But while the samurai grappled with their place in a changing world, Japan itself stood on the precipice of transformation. Cue the Meiji Restoration of 1868, a seismic shift that would make even the most seasoned samurai's head spin. This was Japan's great leap into modernity, a time when the country opened its doors to the West like an eager student hungry for new ideas. The samurai, however, found themselves as relics of a bygone era, much like VHS tapes in the age of streaming. The Meiji Restoration was a time when Japan sought to catch up with the industrialized nations of the world. The feudal system was dismantled, and with it, the samurai's traditional role. The class structure was abolished, and many samurai were forced to trade in their swords for suits, their armor for more mundane attire. The government even offered stipends to former samurai, an attempt to ease the transition. But let's be honest, for a warrior whose identity was forged in the fires of battle, adapting to a world of commerce and industry was a bit like asking a fish to take up mountain climbing. Yet, despite the decline of their practical role, the cultural impact of the samurai remained indelible. These warriors left behind a legacy that would echo through the halls of history. Their code of Bushido, once a matter of life and death, transformed into a philosophical ideal. Words like honor, loyalty, and duty found a new home in the burgeoning national identity. It was a rebranding for the ages, a testament to the enduring power of myth and tradition. As Japan raced toward modernity, the allure of the samurai only grew stronger. In a world increasingly dominated by machines and commerce, the romanticized image of the noble warrior became a symbol of a simpler, albeit harsher, time. And let's face it, who doesn't love a good sword fight, even if it's just on the silver screen? Speaking of which, the samurai myth has found fertile ground in modern media. From Kurosawa's epic films to Hollywood's samurai-inspired action flicks, the image of the warrior clad in armor and wielding a katana endures. These stories, often drenched in romanticism, capture our cultural fascination with the warrior archetype. Perhaps it's the allure of a life lived with purpose and clarity, or maybe it's the thrill of watching a hero navigate a world where the lines between life and death are as sharp as the blade they wield. But here's the kicker. Our modern fascination with samurai, while deeply romanticized, is also a reflection of our own desires and fears. In an age where the battles are fought with pixels and algorithms rather than swords and shields, the samurai represents a connection to a past where human skill and valor were paramount. It's a reminder of a time when one's worth was measured by action and honor, not by social media likes or the size of one's bank account. So, what do these myths say about us? Perhaps they're a testament to our yearning for clarity in a murky world, a desire for heroes who embody virtues that seem all too rare in our daily grind. In the samurai, we see a reflection of our own struggles, our own quest for meaning amidst the chaos of modern life. It's the romance of the warrior's journey, the allure of a tale where honor and courage still hold sway. As we wrap up this odyssey through the world of the samurai, let's take a moment to reflect on the legacy they've left behind. They were more than just warriors. They were custodians of a rich cultural heritage, a bridge between the past and the present. Their stories remind us that history is not just a series of dates and battles, but a tapestry of human experience, woven with threads of ambition, loyalty, and the eternal quest for identity. In the end, the samurai's tale is a mirror reflecting the complexities of the human condition. It's a story of transformation, resilience, and adaptation, a testament to the enduring power of myth and the universal longing for a life of purpose. So, as you drift off to sleep, let the echoes of the samurai's journey guide you, a reminder that even in the face of change, the spirit of the warrior endures. In a tiny hamlet called Domremy, which probably wouldn't have made it onto a medieval map if it weren't for Joan of Arc, a rather unassuming peasant girl was born in 1412. Now, when we say unassuming, we mean it. Domremy was the kind of place where the most exciting event might be a cow wandering into the wrong field. Joan came from a family of farmers. Her father, Jacques d'Arc, and her mother, Isabelle Remay, were about as ordinary as you could get. They weren't nobles, they weren't soldiers, and they certainly weren't prophets. But Joan, well, she had different plans. From a young age, Joan claimed she heard voices, and not just any voices, those of Saints Michael, Catherine, and Margaret. Now, before you roll your eyes and dismiss this as a medieval version of a UFO sighting, the idea of saints chatting with people wasn't that outlandish in the 15th century. Many folks claimed divine experiences, though most didn't try to lead armies afterward. Still, hearing Joan casually drop in conversation, "Oh, yes, St. Michael told me that," must have been quite the conversation starter. Joan's hometown, Domremy, was a patch of land that straddled the border of Champagne and Lorraine in northeastern France. The place was caught in the crossfire of the 100 Years' War, which was less of a war and more of a 116-year-long family feud between England and France. This might sound like a plot from a soap opera, but it was real life. The English and their Burgundian allies were a constant threat, which meant that Joan grew up with a front-row seat to the chaos and carnage of medieval warfare. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. Joan was literate as a potato. That's not an insult. It was merely a fact of life in the 1400. Most peasants couldn't read or write, and Joan was no exception. But don't let that fool you into thinking she was uninformed. News traveled fast even without Twitter, and Joan was acutely aware of the political turmoil around her. The French crown was in a precarious state, and young Charles Roman VII, the Dauphin, was hanging onto his claim by a thread thinner than medieval parchment. It might seem absurd today, but back then, Joan's assertion that she was chosen by God to save France was taken with a mix of skepticism and desperation. France needed a hero, and if that hero happened to be a teenage girl from the middle of nowhere, so be it. Her visions and voices gave her a sense of purpose and urgency. The fact that she was a nobody from nowhere, That was just part of the divine mystery. The idea that a teenager could lead armies sounds like the plot of a novel. But in 1429, France was willing to take any help it could get, even if it came from a girl whose military experience was non-existent. Her first step was to convince the local garrison commander, Robert de Baudricourt, to provide her with an armed escort to meet the Dauphin. Initially, Baudricourt was not impressed. He laughed her off, likely thinking, this girl wants to command an army. What's next? Cows teaching philosophy. But Joan's persistence paid off. After some divine intervention, or perhaps just sheer tenacity, Baudricourt relented, providing her with a small group to make the perilous journey to Chinon. So, here we have Joan, a teenager with a vision, a mission, and not much else. She was about to embark on a journey that would take her from the fields of Domremy to the battlefields of France. Her story was just beginning, but the odds were stacked against her like a Jenga tower on a shaky table. Yet in her heart, Joan believed that she was guided not just by voices, but by a destiny that defied her humble beginnings. So, Joan sets off on her journey to Chinon, and let's be honest, this wasn't exactly a medieval sightseeing tour. This was a high-stakes trek through enemy-infested territories, the kind of journey that would make a Game of Thrones character think twice. With a trusty escort of a handful of soldiers, Joan had to navigate a landscape where the English and their allies were as common as potholes on a country road. It was 1429, and the 100 Years' War was still in full swing. Think of it as the longest, messiest family feud in history, with a body count to match. Now, you might be wondering how a teenage girl managed to convince hardened soldiers to follow her through this minefield. Well, Joan's charisma was like medieval superglue. She had this unshakable confidence, a sense of divine purpose that was as infectious as it was baffling. Her escort was probably thinking, well, if she's that sure, maybe she knows something we don't. Plus, Joan's persistence was legendary. You couldn't exactly ghost someone in the 15th century, but Joan was the kind of person you wouldn't want to leave on read, even if you could. Her destination, Chinon, was where the Dauphin, Charles Roman VII, held court. Now, calling Charles king at this point would have been generous. His claim to the throne was shakier than a medieval suspension bridge, and he was in desperate need of a PR boost. Enter Joan, stage right, with her divine endorsements and can-do attitude. Joan's journey to Chinon was about 350 kilometers, roughly the distance from New York City to Washington, D.C., but with way more chances of running into armed enemies. She and her ragtag entourage made their way through enemy territory in around 11 days. Think about that. 11 days of riding, hiding, and hoping none of them ended up as medieval roadkill. If there's ever a medieval girl scout badge for persistence, Joan would have earned it. Upon arriving in Chinon, Joan faced another challenge, the greasy politics of the French court. The place was a hotbed of intrigue and backstabbing, like a reality TV show, but with more velvet and fewer cameras. Charles Roman VII was surrounded by advisors who were probably less wise counsel and more office gossips. They were understandably skeptical of this peasant girl with wild claims and a fervor that could power a small village. Here's where things get interesting. Despite the skepticism, Charles agreed to meet Joan. The story goes that Charles, ever the trickster, tried to test her divine insight by disguising himself among his courtiers. Joan, however, saw through the ruse and picked him out immediately. Now, whether this was divine intervention or just excellent people-reading skills is up for debate. Either way, Joan's ability to find Charles in a crowd gave her credibility in a court that was more skeptical of miracles than a modern-day internet forum. When it came to her military kit, Joan was about as practical as they come. She needed armor, and fast. The legend paints her as a knight in shining armor, but let's pump the brakes on that image. In reality, Joan's armor was more budget-friendly than legendary. We're talking about a suit that cost around 100 livres tournois. For context, that's about the same as a high-end designer handbag today. Not exactly pocket change, but considering the cost of outfitting a medieval knight could run into the thousands, Joan was practically thrifty. Her armor was functional, not flashy. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of sensible footwear, designed for purpose, not for show. It wasn't gold-plated or bedazzled. It was simply there to keep her alive. Joan's armor wasn't just a fashion statement. It was her ticket to the battlefield, a place where she would prove that her courage was as solid as the steel she wore. With her armor and her conviction, Joan prepared to rally the French forces. She was a walking, talking paradox, a peasant girl in armor, a teenager in a court of nobles, a believer with a plan. Her presence was a beacon of hope in a country that desperately needed one. Joan's journey was just beginning, and the stakes were about to get even higher. As she prepared to lead, the question wasn't whether she would succeed, but how far her resolve would take her in a world that seemed set on proving her wrong. So, Joan was all suited up and ready to rally the troops. But let's be real for a second. Convincing a bunch of battle-hardened soldiers to follow a teenage girl into the fray is no small feat. It's like trying to convince a group of seasoned chefs that a kid with a microwave knows how to cook a gourmet meal. Yet, Joan had something those chefs didn't: divine backing and a charisma that could sell snow to Eskimos. Now, let's dive into the siege of Orleans, Joan's first major military test. Orleans was not just a city. It was the linchpin of French resistance against the English. Picture it as the medieval version of a game of Risk, where losing Orleans could mean losing the entire continent. The city was under siege from October 1428, and by spring of 1429, the French were as desperate for relief as someone trapped in a sauna. Enter Joan, the wild card in this high-stakes poker game. Her arrival in the besieged city was nothing short of a morale booster. It's documented that she entered Orleans on April 29, 1429, like a breath of fresh air, or perhaps a gale-force wind. Her presence alone was enough to get the French troops buzzing. They weren't just following orders anymore. They were following a cause, a symbol, a teenage girl with the audacity to believe she could change their fate. Joan's strategy was both bold and unconventional, two words not often associated with medieval military tactics, which usually involved a lot of waiting around. She urged immediate action, advocating for a direct assault on the English fortifications that surrounded the city. Her plan was simple: hit them where it hurts and hit them hard. This wasn't some drawn-out chess match. It was more like checkers with a side of adrenaline. The soldiers' reactions to Joan were a mixed bag. On one hand, you had seasoned veterans who were probably thinking, "Really, her?" But on the other, Joan's conviction was the kind of thing that could inspire belief even in the most skeptical of hearts. Her unshakable faith and clear-eyed determination were infectious, and in a time when victories were scarce, that kind of morale boost was worth its weight in gold, or at least in salt, which was the actual commodity of choice for payroll back then. And then there was the actual fighting. Joan led several assaults on the English fortifications, including a notable attack on Les Tourelles, a crucial stronghold. Here's where the mythos and reality start to intertwine. Legend has it that Joan was shot with an arrow during the assault, but got back up like it was just a scratch. Now, whether she was channeling some divine healing or just running on pure adrenaline, the fact remains: her grit was undeniable. This kind of behavior was more than just bravery. It was the stuff of legends, the kind of thing that would make a Hollywood director drool. Despite the odds, Joan's tactics bore fruit. By May 8, 1429, the English forces were forced to lift the siege and retreat. This victory was a turning point. It was as if Joan had managed to pull a rabbit out of a very battered hat. Sure, the French forces were still outnumbered, and the English were far from defeated, but the psychological impact was huge. Joan had given the French a taste of victory at a time when they'd almost forgotten what it felt like. But let's not get too carried away with the idea of military genius here. Joan's success at Orleans was as much about timing and morale as it was about strategic brilliance. The English, suffering from low supplies and perhaps a touch of overconfidence, were vulnerable. Joan's attack was like catching them with their armor down. Her presence was a catalyst, transforming a sluggish defense into an invigorated offensive. It was less about a teenage girl outsmarting seasoned generals, and more about her lighting a fire under the French forces when they needed it most. Yet, it wasn't just the soldiers who were feeling the Joan effect. The people of Orleans saw her as nothing short of a miracle. They weren't just cheering for a military victory. They were witnessing what they believed to be divine intervention. Joan had become a living legend, a beacon of hope in a land that had seen too much despair. Her victory at Orleans was a rallying cry that echoed far beyond the city walls. After Orleans, Joan's campaign continued with a series of bold moves that seemed to defy conventional wisdom. She set her sights on Rheims, the traditional site for the coronation of French kings. Her goal was clear: get Charles Roman VII officially crowned and legitimize his claim to the throne. This was more than just a military campaign. It was a political maneuver with the power to reshape France's future. In pursuit of this goal, Joan led the French forces in a series of swift, decisive campaigns across the Loire Valley. Cities that had once been skeptical or outright hostile found themselves inspired, or at least intimidated, by the momentum she brought. One by one, they opened their gates to Joan and her army. The tide was turning, and Joan was riding it like a medieval surfing pro. But let's not forget the gritty realities behind these victories. Travel and warfare in the 15th century were brutal. We're talking miles of marching through mud, rain, and enemy territory. Supplies were always an issue, and the logistics of moving an army through hostile land were like trying to organize a rock tour with no roadies. Yet Joan's presence seemed to make the impossible possible. Her ability to galvanize troops and maintain their morale was a key factor in their success. As for the soldiers, they were now following Joan not just because she had the backing of the Dauphin, but because she had proven herself on the battlefield. Her courage was undeniable, her faith unshakable, and her leadership inspirational. It was as if the more impossible the odds, the more determined she became. This was more than just a military campaign. It was a movement, a groundswell of belief in something greater than themselves. The road to Rheims was not without its challenges, but Joan's army marched with a newfound confidence. By July 17, 1429, Charles Roman VII was crowned in the Grand Cathedral of Rheims. Joan stood by his side, a peasant girl who had defied the odds and changed the course of history. The coronation was a triumph, a validation of everything Joan had fought for. It was a moment that cemented her legacy as the Maid of Orleans, a symbol of hope and resilience. Yet, as we know, history is never quite that simple. Joan's story was far from over, and the challenges ahead would test her in ways she had never imagined. But for now, let's leave her at the height of her triumph, a teenage girl who had dared to dream, dared to fight, and dared to win. The legend and the reality were intertwined, but both were undeniably extraordinary. As Joan set her sights on the future, the world watched with bated breath, waiting to see what this incredible young woman would do next. As Joan stood beside the newly crowned Charles Roman VII, basking in the triumph that defied both her humble origins and the expectations of just about everyone with a pulse, the winds of change were already blowing against her. You see, in medieval politics, no good deed or miraculous military victory goes unpunished. Next chapter of Joan's life was about to get as messy as a toddler with a bowl of spaghetti. Here's the deal. While Joan was busy redefining what a teenage peasant girl could achieve, her enemies were sharpening their knives, figuratively and quite possibly literally. Just a year after the coronation, in 1430, Joan found herself in the crosshairs during a skirmish at Campigny. In an unfortunate turn of events, she was captured by the Burgundians, those pesky allies of the English who had all the charm of a medieval parking ticket. Now, the Burgundians were no slouches when it came to making a quick buck, or, in this case, a hefty 10,000 livres. That's the ransom sum they demanded, which was about the cost of a luxury SUV today. The French king, who had been more than happy to ride Joan's coattails to legitimacy, suddenly developed a case of fiscal conservatism. Charles Roman VII didn't exactly rush to open the royal coffers, leaving Joan to her fate. Joan's capture was a political hot potato, and the English were only too eager to take it off the Burgundians' hands. They were itching to discredit her, to paint her not as a divinely guided savior, but as a heretical upstart. And so, Joan was handed over to the English like a medieval game of pass the parcel, except no one wanted to be the one holding her when the music stopped. Into the trial, a theatrical farce that was less about justice and more about making an example of Joan. The charges against her read like a laundry list of absurdities: witchcraft, heresy, cross-dressing. Yes, cross-dressing. Because apparently wearing practical armor on a battlefield was an affront to decency. Her trial was held in Rouen, and it was the kind of kangaroo court that would make even the most corrupt judge blush. Let's break it down. The trial was conducted by the church, which had a vested interest in maintaining its grip on power. The English were pulling the strings, and the Burgundians were watching with the popcorn equivalent of the 15th century, probably some stale bread and ale. Joan was interrogated by a panel of learned men who, despite their education, couldn't outsmart a teenage girl who was as literate as a brick. You've got to hand it to Joan. She faced her accusers with a sharp wit and unshakable faith. When they pressed her on the voices she claimed to hear, she answered with a confidence that was both maddening and admirable. She outmaneuvered them on theological points, leaving them as flustered as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. But let's not sugarcoat it. The trial was a travesty. Joan was denied legal counsel and subjected to relentless questioning. Yet she held her own, turning the proceedings into a spectacle of her own making. Her responses were as pointed as a knight's lance. One of her famous retorts when asked if she knew she was in God's grace was, "If I am not, may God put me there. And if I am, may God keep me." A theological checkmate if there ever was one. Despite her spirited defense, the trial was rigged from the start. The English needed a scapegoat, and Joan fit the bill perfectly. Her fate was sealed when she was found guilty of heresy. This verdict wasn't just a blow to Joan. It was a calculated move to undermine the legitimacy of Charles' Roman VII reign. If his savior was a heretic, what did that make him? It was medieval politics at its most Machiavellian, long before Machiavelli penned his infamous guidebook. Joan's execution was set for May 30, 1431. She was to be burned at the stake, a fate reserved for those the Church deemed irredeemable. But even in her final moments, Joan displayed a courage that was nothing short of extraordinary. She requested a cross to hold as the flames rose around her, a final act of defiance and faith. As the smoke cleared, Joan's death was meant to be a cautionary tale. Yet, it only served to cement her legacy. Her trial and execution were intended to erase her impact, but instead, they immortalized her. The Church would later do an about-face, exonerating her in 1456, acknowledging the farce her trial had been. In 1920, she was canonized as a saint, a recognition that was both a redemption and an acknowledgement of the injustice she suffered. Joan's story is a testament to the power of belief, both in oneself and in a cause greater than any individual. Her capture and trial were marred by political intrigue and ecclesiastical overreach, yet her legacy defied the intentions of her captors. Joan of Arc became a symbol not just of French nationalism, but of the indomitable spirit of resistance in the face of overwhelming odds. As we leave Joan amid the ashes of Rouen, her legacy continues to smolder. Her story is far from over, and the next chapter will delve into how her legend grew in the years following her death. From peasant girl to military leader, from martyr to saint, Joan of Arc remains a figure of fascination, a blend of myth and reality that continues to inspire. Stay tuned, because her posthumous journey is as compelling as the life she led. Joan's story didn't end with the flames at Rouen. It merely shifted gears, rolling down the lane of history like an out-of-control shopping cart with a busted wheel. What a legacy she left, burned at the stake, yet her spirit refused to be extinguished. As the years ticked on, the myth of Joan of Arc took on a life of its own, growing like a medieval snowball rolling downhill. What started as a straightforward tale of a peasant girl with a penchant for hearing celestial voices snowballed into a complex tapestry of national identity, religious symbolism, and political maneuvering. Let's take a stroll down the annals of history and examine how Joan became the poster child for posthumous redemption. Fast forward to 1456, a solid 25 years after her untimely demise, when the Church, realizing it had a PR problem the size of a Gothic cathedral, decided to host a retrial. This wasn't just any retrial, mind you. It was as much about salvaging the Church's reputation as it was about clearing Joan's name. A panel of inquisitors gathered to review the original trial's proceedings, which, unsurprisingly, were about as credible as a medieval tabloid. The retrial, held in Paris, was like a courtroom drama without the commercial breaks, and the verdict was as predictable as a knight in shining armor. Joan was declared innocent of heresy. The political landscape had shifted dramatically since Joan's death, with Charles Roman VII now comfortably seated on the throne, his legitimacy no longer in question. Joan's martyrdom had become a political asset, and clearing her name was a strategic move to cement her status as a symbol of French resilience. Her vindication wasn't just a nod to justice. It was a shrewd maneuver that underscored the Church's attempt to reconcile with its past mistakes, a mea culpa wrapped in incense and Latin. This was a classic case of history being rewritten by the victors, and Joan's story was spun into a legend that served both church and state. The retrial was significant not just for its outcome, but for its impact on Joan's legacy. Once branded a heretic, she was now embraced as a martyr for the faith and a symbol of national unity. Her story transcended borders, inspiring not just the French, but anyone who dared to dream big in the face of insurmountable odds. She became the embodiment of courage, faith, and an indomitable spirit, a rural icon who defied the social and gender norms of her time. Yet, let's not pretend that Joan's posthumous rise to sainthood was a swift process. It took a few centuries, centuries, as the Church moved at a pace that would make a snail seem like a sprinter. By the time Pope Benedict XV canonized her in 1920, Joan's narrative had been woven into the very fabric of French national identity. She went from being the misunderstood mystic to a bona fide saint, her story polished and repackaged to fit the ideals of the time. Her canonization was a feel-good story for the ages, a redemption arc that underscored the Church's ability to pivot when the winds of public opinion changed direction. Why does Joan's story endure, you might ask? Well, it's a tale as old as time. The underdog who rises to greatness, the martyr who becomes a legend. Joan's narrative is one we can all rally around because it speaks to the human experience, our struggles, our faith, our desire to change the world. Her life was short but impactful, a meteor that burned brightly across the medieval sky. She's the ultimate reminder that sometimes the most unlikely heroes emerge from the most unlikely places. But let's not get too carried away on the wings of romance. Joan's story, as inspirational as it is also a grim reminder of the harsh realities of medieval life. A world where power was wielded by a select few, where women were often relegated to the sidelines, and where the cost of challenging the status quo could be fatal. Joan paid the ultimate price for her convictions, and while her martyrdom became a rallying cry, it also highlighted the systemic issues that plagued the society she lived in. Her legacy is a testament to the power of belief, not just in oneself, but in the idea that change is possible, even in the most entrenched systems. Joan's story is a masterclass in resilience, a tale of grit and determination that transcends time and place. She reminds us that the human spirit is capable of extraordinary things, even in the face of impossible odds. As we wrap up this journey through Joan of Arc's remarkable life, it's clear that her legacy is as much about what she achieved as it is about what she represents. Her story is a mosaic of myth and reality, a blend of romance and harsh truths. Joan of Arc isn't just a name in a history book. She's a symbol of hope, a beacon of courage, and a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary stories come from the most ordinary places. So, as you drift off to sleep with new knowledge tucked under your pillow, remember Joan, the girl who dared to dream, dared to fight, and dared to leave a legacy that still captivates us today.